Sword of Coming Chapter 1131. Peach blossoms are best seen on the water while boating, and the bright moon can be admired from the rooftop. This is Cui Dongshan's fallacy. Feng Shuetao was like a piece of brown candy stuck to him, and he had no choice but to follow the boy in white around. In fact, Feng Shuetao is not very patient or good-tempered, so he can't do anything with a person like Cui Dongshan. The key point is that Cui Dongshan is still an annoying chatterbox. He didn't have enough wine on the boat, but he was full of words. Cui Dongshan did not lie to Xiego. He indeed went through all the Qi masters who presented their certificates according to the list in the Ministry of Justice's files. The locations for the administrative offices in the mountains have been completely selected, which means that there are more official hats and empty chairs than genealogy monks. The Qingping sword sect is really short of manpower. The main reason to blame is that he, as the sect leader, doesn't have enough prestige to attract all the heroes at once. Fortunately, when we were on the ferry in Tongyin, the husband and Xiego each recommended a Qi practitioner for different reasons. Xiego said that the little girl had decent qualifications, while the husband said that the monk had a good character. After taking Feng Shuetao for a walk, Cui Dongshan has decided to take the young nun with freckles under his command. As for the beautiful girl named Xianxia, it is yet to be decided. Cui Dongshan asked mysteriously, "Brother Feng, what do you think of Kuang Kuei's qualifications?" Feng Shuetao, who mistakenly thought that he had made a mistake, used his magical power to take a look at Kuang Kuei. After confirming that it was correct, he gave a relatively euphemistic evaluation. "It's very ordinary." Cui Dongshan said, "Brother Feng didn't see that this boy has a deep family background and is proficient in Qi gaining methods?" Feng Shuetao said truthfully, "I didn't see it." "Even if you can see it, so what? If the Qi master is good at looking at Qi, it will be the icing on the cake, but for Feng Zuido's level of ascension, Kuang Kuei's ability can really be ignored." Cui Dongshan asked, "You have never asked Brother Feng if he has any disciples?" Feng Shuetao said, "There are only a few anonymous disciples. Most of them have died of old age. There are only a few left who I haven't seen for many years. I have no intention of looking for them." "Why does sect leader Cui ask this?" Cui Dongshan raised his chin and said, "Accepting disciples on behalf of disciples is a nice talk." Feng Shuetao shook his head. "Some mess, what follows what?" Cui Dongshan looked shocked and said, "Could it be that Brother Feng wants to take over as a master and accept a disciple?" Feng Zuido's face was stiff and he said in a deep voice, "Sect Master Cui, don't say it's a joke." Cui Dongshan rubbed his hands and smiled. Feng Shuetao asked, "Sect Master Cui, can you speak a few words to me clearly?" Cui Dongshan clapped his hands vigorously. "That's right. Brother Feng, don't guess what I'm thinking, just ask." Feng Shuetao said, "I'm all ears." Cui Dongshan said with a rare serious look, "Kuang Kuei has a good character. That's what my husband said about him." Feng Shuetao, "You should know that when my husband looks at people and says they have a good character, that's really a very high evaluation. It's unpleasant, you won't get this kind of evaluation at least for the time being. Of course you have a similar view of my husband. Next, I will definitely take Kuang Kuei to practice at Qingping Sword Sect, but how to arrange the identity? I have my own plan. If I remember correctly, Brother Feng had an unnamed disciple named Yin Yi. There was a mountaintop in Aai continent called Jie Mountain, which is now Yupu. He had lofty ambitions but was unable to establish a sect due to insufficient military exploits. In addition, he also has a daughter who is a Daoist cultivator and a sword cultivator. She has longed for the Great Wall of Sword Qi since she was young, but Yin Yi loves his daughter and is reluctant to let her go there to experience. Yin Ying ran away from home twice and was killed by the old antique father Yin Yi. After being brought back to the mountains, the relationship between father and daughter has been tense for decades. When the Great Wall of Sword Qi ascended to the colorful world, Yin Ying knew that she was destined to never be able to kill monsters on the battlefield like the two local swordsmen in this life. She was so disillusioned that she even dropped to the freezing point and threatened to give up the practice of swordsmanship. Yin Yi was very worried about this. When it comes to how to untie the knot in her heart, of course, the person who untied the knot must also tie the knot. Yin Yi could first recognize Kuang Kuei as his wife. Personal disciple, with this relationship I can help him introduce a sword immortal from the Great Wall of Sword Qi to Yin Ying and recognize him as his master. But Yin Yi must pay a price that is not a price. He and Jie Shan must become Qingping sword sect's enshrinement and descent from the mountain. The price is that he will never have the opportunity to become the founder of the sect based solely on his ability and luck. It is not a price, but because with Yi's cultivation potential, qualifications and connections, such ambitions, this is an extravagant hope. Of course, once we meet, I can make him completely give up and be convinced. Yi has no destiny to start a sect, but at the same time his daughter has a great chance to be there. After a lapse of 2,000 years, the first swordsmanship sect was established in the continent. The Qingping sword sect and I are happy to see this happen. If the Qingping sword sect is involved, then Aizhou has never been able to deal with it. Beiju Luzhou, do you have to be a little more tolerant and consider whether this matter is recognized by my husband and Luo Shan? During this period of time, which is not short or not long, since you Feng Shuatao, you are the preacher of Yi, so don't expect to stay out of the matter. You and I had a heart-to-heart talk before and I, Tui Dongshan, said that I was a transitional sect master. Aren't you a transitional worshipper of the Yugui sect? Jiang Shangzhen treats you as a true friend, and he is very clear about the habits of Xianxia. Yeshio Qingmi is not in line with the ethos of Yugui sect, so he naturally does not want to and will not completely tie you to death in Yugui sect. My husband helped the Qingping sword sect find a secret protector, Qing Tong. Then I, who serve as Chao Qinglang's younger brother, should also find a reliable protector for the next sect leader. After hearing this, Brother Feng suddenly became enlightened. After going round and round after all the talk, the one I really like is you, fellow Taoist Qingmi. Feng Shuatao was stunned and speechless, as if he was meeting the young man in white next to him for the first time. Cui Dongshan continued to talk eloquently. You may have heard a rumor that the Qinghuang Temple in Haoran Tianxia secretly keeps a separate list to record the famous people who have meritorious deeds. Like my senior sister, whose name is in among them, she traveled to various countries and received special courtesy when passing through the Qinghuang Temple. As for Feng Shuatao, she did not have this treatment. But at the Confucian Temple it was really different just because she once practiced Qingmi in the wild. He once risked his life, first followed a Liang to the hinterland of the wilderness, and then partnered with Jiang Shangzhen to protect the path of a group of young people including Chao Ci, and had a close encounter with a monk from the wilderness lineage. But Feng Shuatao didn't do it at all. I know how to take advantage of this seemingly unearned credit, but I know how to maximize its benefits, and in a reasonable way that follows the rules and has no worries about killing the goose that lays the eggs. My husband is a scholar and I am a businessman. My husband is rigorous in his studies and self-cultivation. He wants to combine benevolence and righteousness with merit, but I only pursue merit. So while I am still the master of the Qingping sword sect, you must cherish this once-in-lifetime indulgence. This is a fleeting opportunity. Feng Shuatao, I have made the minimum price clear. Will you do this deal? They'll count to 10 and don't wait until it's too late. When Cui Dongshan was about to count to 10, Feng Shuatao said, I only have a very wild utilitarian question to ask. Cui Dongshan stopped talking, nodded with a smile and said, I'm just waiting for your words. Don't worry, I will help you point out a path to unity. Whether it can be successful or not, I conservatively estimate that it will be between 50 and 50. Feng Shuatao stabilized his mind and asked, seriously? Cui Dongshan said, the ugly words are ahead. It will definitely take you a long time. Can be as short as 800 years or as long as several thousand years. It is possible. Feng Shuatao said in a deep voice, it's a deal. Cui Dongshan asked tentatively, this kind of honest gentleman's agreement doesn't require an oath or a written document, right? Feng Shuatao said, friends are friends and business is business. We have to find a middleman to help witness this. Cui Dongshan asked carefully, for example? Feng Shuatao said with a smile, Zhongzhu Cui is a scholar of heaven and man, and is best at understanding people's hearts. You and I know this well, so why bother? Cui Dongshan stamped his feet and said, I have a normal relationship with the respected Huolong Zhenren. Feng Shuatao said with a dark face, I mean Chen Pingon. Cui Dongshan struggled for a moment, pretending to express his feelings and then felt relieved and vowed, either way my husband finally agreed. Feng Zueto's face showed sarcasm. Sect Master Cui, can you be sincere and think that I am a fool? Cui Dongshan shook his sleeves and said with a smile, okay, then I will be honest and tell you the truth. There is no business without taking risks. I would like to remind you again, if you dare to threaten my husband me, I will kill you. Good guy, I can turn the page faster than I can turn the book. Feng Zuidao's intuition told him at this moment that the boy in white was not joking. In an instant, Cui Dongshan rubbed oil on his feet and was about to run away. In the end, the visitor still held his head down and said with the same smile, "Zone leader Cui is amazing. Is he doing business with others with such good intentions?" Feng Shuatao gloated and laughed endlessly. As expected, one thing fell after another. It turned out that when Cui Dongshan pretended to have a heart-to-heart talk with his husband, Feng Shuatao really told Qin Pingon about the matter. But he cut off the content and only said that he had reached an agreement with Cui Zongzong and was willing to worship the Yuguizong after he resigned. Immediately transferred to Qingping Sword Sect to serve as a long-term registered worshipper. Although Qin Pingon didn't know how Cui Dongshan persuaded this ascended realm wild cultivator, after all, it was a great good thing and there was no reason to refuse it. However, as soon as he put his mind to this place, he heard Cui Dongshan saying the most truthful words over there. Who was he going to kill? Cui Dongshan shrank his neck and cursed Feng Shuatao as a dog-like wild cultivator. The boy in white was beaten with a chestnut and screamed, and he scolded him, "We are all members of our own family, how can we talk to the future worshipper?" Qin Pingon clasped his fists and said with a smile, "Fellow Qingmi Taoist, please be more patient in the future." Feng Shuatao returned the salute with clasped fists. "That's easy to say." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "In the future, when you get to Qingping Sword Sect, you can often go to Luopa Mountain to drink tea and wine." Feng Shuatao heard Xianxi's elegance and said with a smile, "There is no need to complain. I can trust sect leader Xia's business experience." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Dongshan usually doesn't speak well, but most of the time he is reliable in his work." Feng Shuatao hesitated and said, "I have doubts." Qin Pingon laughed loudly. "It seems that Brother Feng no longer regards himself as an outsider. It's very, very good." For some reason, Feng Shuatao discovered that Cui Dongshan was completely different after Qin Pingon showed up. To be precise, when the husband and student were present at the same time, such as at the wine table on Tongyin Ferry earlier, Cui Dongshan would lose all his momentum. And there is no awkwardness at all, just like a silent understanding of the heart. It is natural and there is no reason to say. Qin Pingon said, "Don't talk about him in Dongshan. Over at Qingping Jianzong, Qinglang is more of a serious scholar than me, the teacher. At the same time, he is more flexible than me and has a firm heart to learn. I hope Brother Feng will do it in the future. Please take care of me and give me guidance. I would like to thank you in advance." Feng Shuatao hummed. "Here in the capital, I have had several contacts with Chao Qinglang and I have a good impression." Feeling personally the harmonious master-disciple relationship between Qin Pingon, Cui Dongshan, and Chao Qinglang, Feng Shuatao felt sad in his heart and wondered if he really should go to Aizhou to meet the man who he wouldn't dare to see unless he went there. "Are you looking for your disciple Yin Yi?" Among the anonymous disciples, there are different qualifications and different people's hearts. Some use the tiger skin as a banner to use their own names, while some gradually drift away and become strangers. Since you Feng Shuatao don't take us seriously, we don't care whether it is by name or not, but there is also an outlier like Yin Yi who always wants to practice hard and establish a sect, and one day he will prove to the master that he is qualified to be a direct disciple. It seemed that Yin Yi had thought of hiring Xie Songhua to be Yin Ying's swordsmanship master. Thinking of this, Feng Shuatao asked, "Why didn't Xie Songhua serve as a worshipper of the Qingping Sword Sect?" Cui Dongshan chuckled. Qin Pingon said helplessly, "Maybe Xie Jianxian likes freedom and doesn't like being restrained by the sect. I guess the reason why she is willing to serve as the family minister of the Lu family in Aizhou is because of the friendship with her fellow countrymen." Cui Dongshan was still minding his own business there, but he got another solid chestnut blow. Feng Shuatao felt like he was falling into the clouds, but he didn't delve into the reason. It turns out that Qin Pingon is really afraid of Xie Songhua and gets scared every time they meet. This female swordsman from Aizhou is not an ordinary person who has no inhibitions about her words. She is also good at talking dirty words while drinking. I really can't find my favorite Taoist companion. In fact, Qin Yingguan can make do with it. Don't worry, I don't want a status. I can hide my beauty in the golden house. Don't look at Song Pin, who is so cold and airy in front of others. In fact, when we talk about the boudoir in private, it's all nonsense. Even I can't stand it. TSK. No matter how courageous Qin Pingon was, how could he dare to lure a wolf into his house? Cui Dongshan asked with a smile. Why did His Majesty the Emperor of Yunyan Kingdom lead a group of high-ranking court officials in an alley and act like a puppet? Qin Pingon said angrily, Isn't the alley cooler than the restaurant? Cui Dongshan's little chicken pecked the rice. Okay. Feng Shuatao laughed it off. Qin Pingon put away his mind and returned to the fly restaurant, where he continued to drink and eat hot pot with Fan Tong and Xianxia. The table next door stood up to pay the bill and left the restaurant, but soon discovered that the situation in the alley outside was unusual. A narrow alley is roughly divided into 3 hilltops. At the front is a pampered middle-aged man with a jade pendant with a dragon pattern hanging from his waist. There were 2 majestic old men standing next to them. One of them had a white face and no beard, with his hands in his sleeves and his habitual bowing. The other person has a tall crown and ancient appearance, full of Taoism and sharp eyes. Then there were 7 or 8 men with very high official status and different ages, all wearing casual clothes. Further back, approaching the corner of the alley, there were all burly young men wearing imperial swords. Under the moonlight, the cuffs of some of them slightly showed the light of their armor. When the group of people leaving the restaurant saw this scene, they had no choice but to turn around and walk away from the other side of the alley, walking slowly. Before they left the alley, a woman in the team was extremely excited and said in a trembling voice, I recognize 2 princes in the alley. The other woman was full of energy and said in a low voice, It seems that there is also the Minister of Rights. As for the several chi refiners, they communicated with each other from the bottom of their hearts. The person standing next to the middle-aged man seems to be the new national master of Yunyan Kingdom. So, the emperor is here in person? You can't just wait for someone. If that's the case, it's strange. Who can have such a big name nowadays? Is it the leader Wei Ying of the Yugui sect? Wei Dajiangxian is so free that he eats hot pot in the same restaurant as us? Is it that sect master Cui from the Qingping sword sect? No, I heard that the sect master is a young man with good looks and likes to wear white clothes. Anyway, they just couldn't figure it out. In the store, Qin Pingon asked seemingly casually, Fan Tong, do you want to find a job at the foot of the mountain, such as making an iron rice bowl in the government of a small country, or go to the mountain to find an immortal sect suitable for practicing Taoism? Fan Tong said carelessly, You can choose whatever you want. The question is who is willing to accept us, Master Chen, right? Xie Sanyang thought for a while and said, Master Chen Xian, to be honest, we still want to go to the mountains to find a destiny with the immortal family. Qin Pingon nodded, I understand. Standing up, Qin Pingon clasped his fists and said goodbye, saying with a smile, We are full of wine and food. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. See you again if we are destined. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand and pressed it softly to indicate that there was no need to be pretentious and stood up to see him off. We are so familiar, so don't be polite. Fan Tong remembered something and was about to speak, reminding Qin Xianxia that he had forgotten to pay, and that we had agreed to treat you and you would pay the bill, when the woman stepped on the back of her shoe and glared at her fiercely. The man was a little confused and Master Qin Xian was not short of money. This time he was treating us and we can invite him back next time. Master Qin had already said that they were all acquaintances and there was no pretense. In a quiet alley, a local woman from Beijing who was walking at the end of the team turned her head to look into the alley. She has been in the romantic world for many years and has never seen any scenery or wealth, but she still saw an unbelievable scene that she will never forget. I remember that because we were sitting next to each other, she and the last man sitting at the next table were sitting with their backs facing each other. Once when she was toasting those immortal masters, she felt that the seat was cramped, and she wanted to remind the man behind her, Could you lean closer to his wine table? But when she turned around after toasting, she found that the man had already moved the bench on his own initiative. However, when the poor man in green shirt walked out of the restaurant, the middle-aged men in the alley began to bow and salute. At the same time, everyone bowed their heads, and there was a faint clanking of iron armor. Zhao Taiyan, the leader of the Danjing sect, is a chi practitioner in the cave realm. More than 100 years old, the man is short in stature and has bright eyes. Commoner and straw sandals, with an iron mace engraved with thunder talismans on his waist. When Zhao Taiyan and his group of chi practitioners arrived at the capital city of Yunyan Kingdom, They followed the little miscellaneous fish in the stream into the long tan without making any waves, unlike in that remote and small country where they could still be called gods a few times. Zhou Xian had a master's property here and he opened a grocery store in Yulindu. It was difficult to find with twists and turns, so you had to ask for directions. If you ask how the business is, it's probably not as good as the nearby late-night restaurant that sells grilled fish. When Zhou Xian saw his fellow merchant who was looking gloomy, he could only comfort him by saying that business on the mountain is always like this. If you don't open for 3 years, you will have to wait for 3 years if you open. The other 2 groups of Qi practitioners who were traveling with them thought that they could get some credit and find a place to stay in the capital, but they never thought that they would have to find an inn by themselves. In fact, both parties are embarrassed, and it is even more embarrassing to pretend that they are not embarrassed at all. After a few years, the brothers reunited, and Xianxia kept pouring out his bitterness at the wine table. It turned out that the high-ranking officials in the capital, not to mention the emperor's relatives and Jiuqing, all had very high vision. Langguan, the threshold is not easy to cross. They don't take the lower 5 realm monks seriously at all. Behind the scenes, Xianxia wanted to return to his sect, hide in the mountains and pick up the practice again. Zhou Xian was helpless about this and silently made up his mind if it didn't work out he would stay here and let junior brother Shang return to the sect with the new disciple. In today's world, the immortal masters on the mountain are not rich, but the countries below the mountain are not rich. They are all tightening their belts to live their lives. Several juniors who came down the mountain to practice this time, they started practicing Taoism late and their qualifications are still relatively young. They don't have much feelings about it. They just feel that when they go out to practice Taoism, they should often eat and sleep in the open air and endure more hardships. Master Zhou Xian has experienced many blessings. He remembers that when he was young he went down the mountain with his elders for the first time. When he was young he said in Taoist books that the world is vast and fame and wealth are wrapped in turtle shells. Turned out to be all nonsense. When people go to the foot of the mountain they enter a world of flowers. The elders are also open-minded. There is one thing to say on the mountain, but it is another thing in private under the mountain. They are not pedantic and old-fashioned. They just allow a few of them to be more casual. In fact, you don't have to strictly abide by the rules and precepts. You just need to remember to go back to the mountains and don't talk nonsense, lest the Zhonglu people listen to you and take the opportunity to make a fuss. Xianxia had a complicated look on his face and murmured, "Senior brother Zhao, how could I have been practicing Taoism in the mountains and become a business?" After drinking a bowl of barley wine which was as light as water, Xianxia tugged on his collar, shook his sleeves and laughed at himself. "My body is full of copper stench and I can't even wash it off." Zhao Tian smiled and said, "This time I go down the mountain, it was the head brother who asked me to take your place." Xianxia glanced at the head lawyer and waved his hand, "Don't fool me with such lame excuses. There is no reason for a sect to open a shop in the market to make money all year round. I am not complaining to you because I want to go back and hide in peace. It's okay to live a miserable life, but you can't let me not complain, right?" Zhao Tian became more and more sad, but he still smiled and said, "It will get better in the future. When the head brother becomes a Jindan Earth Immortal, our sect will truly have a place on Tonggishao Mountain." Xianxia just drank a bowl of wine and said with a depressed look, "I saw a good seedling not long ago. The qualifications are really good. I think they are no worse than the head brother. It's a pity that I didn't fight and let someone else it away. I'm a coward. I don't even dare to let go of a fart." Zhao Tian was speechless, hesitated and asked, "Still in the capital? Is there any room for mediation?" Xianxia shook his head and said, "The person who robbed someone was a young nascent soul realm. In fact, the other person was quite kind and polite. Besides, the kid had officially become a disciple and he even took the initiative to come to me and apologize. He also said send a message to his master that if there is an opportunity in the future he will definitely repay a portion of the fate to the Danjing sect." Zhao Tian sighed. Among the ancestors of the sect, the one with the highest level was Yuanying. It's just that the last time Tonggishao suffered a catastrophe, the entire sect moved to Wuxia Tianxia with the Divine Master. Zhao Tian and the others were unwilling to leave and took the initiative to stay. Except for the senior brother in charge and the senior sister who is now in charge of money, others like Zhao Tian and Xianxia were not even direct disciples of the ancestral master hall back then. "I heard that the colorful world will open its doors again in 80 years. I wonder what the situation will be like then." Zhao Tian said, Before going down the mountain, senior brother and senior sister Huang called me. They have made a decision. I want to talk to you and hear your opinion. Xianxia picked up a salted peanut, chewed it carefully, looked sad but said in an extremely firm tone, "No matter what you discuss, I have already thought about it. Even if they return to Tong 80 years later, Yishou, I don't recognize them as the ancestors anymore. If the three of you want to recognize your ancestors and return to the clan, help me cancel the Danjing sect's genealogy, and I won't go back to the mountain to be looked down upon. Anyway, it doesn't matter if you have me or not. Both. It was before and it will be even more so in the future." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "You are mistaken. We all have the same view as you." After drinking to drown their sorrows and talking to each other, Xianxia's disciple came to the backyard to report the news. A chi practitioner who was out looking for money came to the shop and handed in a greeting card. The other party said that he had a small sect and was proficient in building institutions. Work with the economy to see if there is any opportunity to cooperate with your company. Zhao Taiyan opened the note box, read the text on the greeting note and handed it to his junior brother. In the end, Zhao Taiyan and Xianxia looked at each other, completely confused. "Why don't you find someone with strong family background to deceive you in the autumn wind?" Xianxia told his disciples, "Send the other party away with good words and don't start any unnecessary disputes." Unexpectedly, the uninvited guest had already left the shop and came to the backyard. With a smile on his face, he stretched out his hand and said, "Zhao Zhonglu, brother Xiang, long time no see." Just because the other party was too warm, and the relationship was as hot as meeting an old friend after a long absence. Zhao Taiyan glanced at Xianxia, and Xianxia also looked at Zhao Taiyan, thinking that it was the other party's friend who came to visit. "I've seen people who are messy, but I've never seen anything so inexplicable." The young man in white didn't seem to have any self-awareness, with a sincere look on his face. He stood on the patio in the courtyard and talked to himself. It is said that there are 24 pools in the Danjing sect mountain, each named after the solar term. It is really a beautiful place suitable for practicing Taoism, soothing to the eyes and nourishing the heart. What a great place. From my point of view, it's unreasonable not to have a person who reaches the fifth realm. The young man continued, "I also heard that the founder of your mountain was a traveling doctor. He sold medicinal materials in the mountain market. He met a strange person by chance. Because of his kind-heartedness, he got a fairy fate and embarked on the path of spiritual practice. After that, he encountered many strange encounters and was also influenced by it. Well deserved. Until the Danjing sect's incense Taoism is passed on to this generation of leaders, what should I say? Every family has sutras that are difficult to recite." There was a man with his arms folded across his chest at the door. Hearing this, he groaned. Xianxia looked unhappy and said, "You have something to say." The young man said, "I also have a serious genealogy monk in my own mountain, but it is a new sect after all. I don't have enough foundation, so I have to go out to make money myself. In addition to me, who is a master of construction, there are also several farmers and pharmacists. As a monk, it is not difficult to build and take care of gardens, cultivate exotic flowers and herbs, transplant ancient immortal trees, select and move feng shui stones, and do things like blue cranes, white deer, flying fish in the clouds, etc. It is not difficult to make a mountain sect more immortal. Family style, in addition to imitating ancient monuments in memorial arches, naming cliff carvings, and even serving as temporary worshippers, paper guests, helping to support the scene or making connections, renting ferries with other families, etc. As long as you can think of it, I can do it, you guys. Unexpectedly, I can do it without bragging. In short, I just rely on my ability and conscience and earn some hard-earned money when I go out." The young man raised his thumb and pointed at someone behind him. "For example, this friend behind me is a hidden medicine master and chi practitioner. He is definitely a good player." Feng Shuetao smiled and said, "The craftsmanship is not bad." Before becoming an earth immortal, Feng Zuido's old profession was indeed farming. Zhao Taiyan held back his laughter. "How do you calculate the specific price?" The boy in white said, "You can sit down and talk slowly." Xianxia warned from the bottom of his heart, "Brother Zhao, be careful that the other party is coming for your mace. Maybe they have already come here and stepped on it, just waiting for you to show up. After all, the most valuable item of the Danjing sect now is this mountain-holding treasure." Zhao Taiyan said, "It should be so. You must be on guard against others. I am even more afraid that this group of people will have old grudges with the Danjing sect." The young man stood on tiptoes, stretched his neck and looked at the table in the room. Why don't you have a little drink and make some snacks? Take a step back and say that if you can't make a deal you should just make friends. Xianxia had sharp eyes and asked, the robes worn by this immortal master are not cheap. The young man in white put his hands on his hips. That's necessary, just make a swollen face to look fat. As the old saying goes, a person depends on his clothes as if he depended on his gold. As a Taoist like us, when we go out we will inevitably encounter some people who look down on others, so we still have to do it. Let's talk about the outfit and pomp. The young man, who was a disciple of Xianxia and also a shop clerk, had just learned how to speak from the heart, and said to his master and the master lawyer, this guy just stayed outside and squatted at the door chatting with me for a long time. It's hard to tell whether he is a liar or not. Anyway, he has a bad temper. The innocent boy did not dare to say that his peers would praise him as soon as he met him. He was a Taoist immortal who could only be seen once in a century. Why did he end up in the market instead of seeking immortality in the mountains? Such words, regardless of whether they are true or false, are always pleasant to listen to. The most prominent wealthy ministers in the capital have recently led some of their smarter juniors from house to house, and some of them have already recognized several masters. Xianxia also wanted to recruit a few anonymous and cheap disciples, but now the details of the Danjing sect cannot withstand inquiries, and the secrets will be exposed as soon as they are investigated. Otherwise, like those who are in the middle 5 realms, as long as they come to the door, they will not refuse. They only need to teach a simple breathing technique or teach a patchwork of Taoist instructions, and then give them a few pills to eat the immortal. With elixirs you can make a lot of money. As for this newly acquired disciple, no matter how average his qualifications were, he was still capable of practicing immortal arts. Xianxia was already satisfied that he could find him, which was an unexpected surprise. No matter how patient Zhou Xian was, he still had the idea of expelling guests. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, don't rush to chase people away. In fact, the reason why I came to ask for a meeting is that besides buying and selling, there is also a fate to talk about. Zhou Xian asked, how do you say this? Cui Dongshan said, my husband, along with a woman wearing a mink hat, met you in the realm of the mountain god in a temple. My husband mentioned this to me and said that you have a good family tradition. Zhou Xian calmed down a little. The girl in the mink hat had used some of the methods of the immortal family, and her moral character was not low, quite impressive. If she and the man in green shirt, who had not spoken to each other from beginning to end, were really interested in her own weapon, it would be easy for them to steal it in the wilderness, so there was no need to make such twists and turns. The reason couldn't be simpler. You can rob someone by force, so why cheat? Zhou Xian threw the greeting card back to the young man in white and said, please tell me what you want. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, the temple has a lower courtyard and the immortal mansion has an upper sect. Is this the truth? Logically speaking, you abandoned sons of the old Danjing sect. Even if you are wronged, you still have to bear the humiliation and continue to guard your empty ancestral heritage. When they return later, they will obediently offer it with both hands. It's just that the 4th eldest Yaxing in the Haoran Confucian temple has never heard of the king, the minister, the father, the son. The Yaxing did not teach scholars to be loyal, foolish, and filial. If the king is not a king, then the ministers cannot be ministers. This is righteous principles are in order. You need to know that the most fearful thing about spiritual practice is that you are on the wrong path, worshipping mountains indiscriminately and recognizing thieves as your father. People who practice Taoism have 7 emotions and 6 desires, and they are not sincere and upright. They have thousands of thoughts, just like a worm on a lion. You should sort out the rules of the mountain and revive your family tradition. The big waves wash away the sand, and when the sand in the wash basin is exhausted, you will see the real gold. I think you are very good. The upper beam is not straight, but the lower beam is not crooked. This is great. Practice to seek immortality, practice to the Tao, it is still a little different. The body is full of copper stench. How can it be that you are not a Taoist, not just a pure literal immortal? Xianxia said in his heart, Senior brother Zhao, I can't speak to him. Is that guy going crazy with alcohol and talking nonsense? It does not seem. If you chew it carefully, it makes a lot of sense. Zhao Ten said, maybe I can talk to the head brother. Cui Dongshan blinked and looked at the shop assistant. Young man, I hit it off with you at first sight, and I want to help you write a wonderful story about one person achieves enlightenment, a chicken and a dog ascend to heaven. The young man was elated and in disbelief and timidly asked, "Can I really practice Taoism and become an immortal?" Cui Dongshan said with a playful smile, "You belong to the protagonist in the second half of the story of one man achieves the way chickens and dogs ascend to heaven." The young man didn't hear what was said and looked confused. "What?" Cui Dongshan patted the young man on the shoulder. "You are so smart, no wonder we hit it off." Zhou Xian thought for a moment and asked, "Can you make it simpler?" Cui Dongshan shouted loudly, "Since we are all enlightened people who understand the truth, I will make it clear that I am here today to form an alliance with a brand new Danjing sect." Zhou Xian became increasingly confused and curiously asked the young man in white, "May I ask the name of your sect?" The boy in white grinned and said, "As I said, it's a new sect called Qingping Sword Sect." Xianxia sighed and said from his heart, "Brother, I really can't stand this kid." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "How dare I ask this immortal master if his surname is Cui and Dongshan?" The boy in white nodded vigorously, "Yes, I am Cui Dongshan." Zhou Xian took a deep breath and said, "Get out." Cui Dongshan turned around and said, "Fellow Qingmi Daoist, have you seen that you've already guessed my identity? I'm smarter than you." Feng Shuetao smiled and nodded, "It seems so." "Qingmi? That new enshrinement of Jade Guizong, the Ascension Realm monk of Azu? Indeed, I heard that this old is now in the capital." Xianxia shouted angrily, "Get out of here." Cui Dongshan gave a thumbs up, "You are a man, I won't argue with you. When will we start drinking?" Cui Dongshan turned around and asked, "Fellow Qingmi, it seems that the talks have broken down. What should I say?" Feng Shuetao smiled and said, "I don't care. You can stay and drink or you can get out." Cui Dongshan clasped his fists and shook them vigorously, "See you later. If you really encounter something and are desperate, you can go to the Tongyin Ferry in Yulindu to find someone. Just say that you have met Xie Zishi or go directly to him. This is Feng Shuetao next to me." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "Then my junior brother and I won't see the guests off." Xianxia suddenly said, "No matter who you are or what your intentions are, I want to explain one thing to you. Our Danjing sect also has many Taoist practitioners with pure Taoist hearts. Perhaps the worrying thoughts are like those who are not good at drinking and drink a bowl of strong wine." Cui Dongshan nodded, "Absolutely, otherwise none of you would be able to let me come here and say so much. I'm drinking in vain. I'm thirsty, so we really can't drink together?" Feng Shuetao couldn't stand listening anymore and turned around to leave. Cui Dongshan imitated the characters on the stage, raised his feet, held a whip and rode a horse and shouted, "Fellow Taoist, move slowly." After leaving the shop, Cui Dongshan put his hands in his sleeves and said earnestly, "Friend Qingmi Taoist, you travel everywhere and travel thousands of miles. We can't just walk around and take a look at the people, events and scenes. It is said that the human body is a small world with mountains and rivers and wild cultivation. Being alone and without worries, do you really not underestimate yourself? Whether you can meet an immortal, whether you are distracted, whether you have seen the clouds and smoke, or whether you are the mainstay in the middle, where is the heart, leaving people speechless on the beach? The ape is jumping and the horse is galloping. We mountain climbers and monks face the wall. Okay, how do you handle yourself? I know you are tough enough to not listen to these words, but as a friend who chops off chicken heads and burns yellow paper, I still want to talk to you. Brother Feng, are you touched? Suddenly you think I'm a weird person?" Feng Shuetao said with a straight face, "Get lost." Cui Dongshan really left alone. "Okay, I have the order. I have a little donkey but I never ride it, da. In that long time which seemed like a foreign land to everyone, Lu Chen asked Jing Juzhong, "Why do you have to do this?" Jing Juzhong said calmly, "Master Lu, do you think I need to threaten anyone with words?" Lu Chen pretended to be stupid. "Ah? What did Mr. Jing say?" Jing Juzhong turned a deaf ear. "I want to exchange my son with Qingming Tianxia. As for whether you believe it or not, that is your business by Yujing." Lu Chen suddenly widened his eyes and pointed at his face. "Mr. Jing, look at Pindo's eyes and face. Are you sincere or not? Do you believe it?" Lu Chen beat his chest and said, "It's no exaggeration, I am more trustworthy than you." Jing Juzhong just remained silent. For a certain chess game that has been agreed upon, the chessboard is the entire Qingming world. Both sides of the game have their own initiative. Jing Zhezhong's first move was to be the first to reach the 14th realm. The first mover of the great master to teach Koming was a white jade capital. Lu Chen looked gloomy. "Isn't it good to educate yourself by yourself? Why take the initiative to join the game and act like a stirrer? Lass, you can't say that. King Ming's world is not a cesspit and Mr. Zheng is not a stirrer. Lu Chen murmured and repeated, Xing Juzhong and Qing Ming Xianxia are naturally not like this. Xing Juzhong finally said, I remember that in ancient times for travelers and monks, the place where a person was born was called the country of his hometown. The country where he lived and served was called the country of home, and the place of ancestral home was called the motherland. Lu Chen asked, aren't you partial? Who are you helping? Or did you reach some kind of secret agreement with someone earlier, and you had to do it as a last resort? Xing Juzhong shook his head. No. Lu Chen was furious for the first time. He pointed at Xing Juzhong's nose and cursed, you who bullies others just because you are smart. Tell me, what are you trying to do? Can you, Xing Juzhong, be responsible for the chaos in the world? Xing Juzhong smiled and said, I am self-cultivation. If 3/14th realms cannot defeat you, Dou, then what about 3 false 15th realms? Lu Chen continued to curse, what kind of arithmetic? Who taught you? 3 equals 9 or 3 equals 1. Xing Juzhong waved his sleeves, Lu Chen, just keep scolding me, don't spit on me. Lu Chen sat slumped on the ground feeling extremely aggrieved and sniffing, isn't Xiaodao getting impatient? He can't help himself. Xing Juzhong said slowly, in my opinion, Lu Chen is the only sober person in the whole wine tank. Lu Chen, however, remembered a sentence for no reason and muttered to himself, I've never been drunk before, so I hate drinking. Xing Juzhong smiled and said, how about tomorrow? See you tomorrow. Since there is nothing to do today, why don't we have a drink? Year after year, wildflowers bloom all over the world. Sword of Coming Chapter 1132. The young man who looked like a white cloud returned to the Tongyin ferry and saw the girl in the mink hat squatting by the ladder at the bow. Cui Dongshan smiled and asked, is Mr. Xie squatting in the pit or blocking me? Xiego was too lazy to get up. He put his hand to his mouth and asked, Sect Master Cui, can you really show that Qing me a path to harmony? Didn't you trick him? Cui Dongshan then squatted down and sighed, my family tradition is to treat people with sincerity. If you say it is between 5 and 5, it is half and half, and I will never deceive others. Cui Dongshan groaned and threw down his sleeves. I am the leader of the sect and my face is more valuable than gold. Xiego is doubtful. Cui Dongshan seemed to have realized it later with a look of horror on his face. How did Xianxia know such a secret? Could it be that Taoist fellow Qingmi and I were standing side by side watering water at the corner of the alley when we saw no one around? I was also looked at the meeting. I'm just a young man. If this spreads out, how will I see anyone in the future? Xiego grinned and said, it's not like shit, what's there to see? Cui Dongshan took a breath of air and treated each other with admiration after 3 days of separation. Xianxia had only been practicing in Luopa Mountain for a few days, and his chatting skills had skyrocketed. Pei Qian was walking on the bow of the boat and said, it's nothing more than success or failure, it's just half and half. Xiego looked confused. Huh? Can you still cause trouble like this? Could it be that he has become a fake mountain of desolation? Oh, I remember Jing Dafeng said that sect leader Cui is now a member of the Qingping sword sect, so he threw water out of the way so we won't kiss him. Pei Qian said, it's not all a lie. Since Senior Qingmi didn't hear the implication of Master Huolong's words, the younger brother had no choice but to help. Cui Dongshan stretched out his hands and gave a thumbs up. The person who knows me best is Senior Sister. Xiego's expression remained the same. Huh? Pei Qian could only patiently explain. Senior Qingmi is the kind of Ascension Realm monk who has lost his spirit. He has completely given up on the 14th realm. He thinks that his qualifications and opportunities are not as good as those who are stronger in Ascension. In fact, this kind of state of mind is the true state of mind. Let Senior Qingmi's road to Ascension come to an end. If the big white goose tells you Feng Shuatao, there is still a chance. Feng Shuatao may not be willing to believe it. This is why the big white goose said, the Taoist heart is tough enough. It was actually a pun. In this case, big white goose used a convenient method. In short, it was to let Feng Shuatao raise his heart again. There is hope even if it is still slim, but yesterday's Feng Shuatao and tomorrow's Feng Shuatao will change. It's very different. In a sense, it can be said that Feng Shuatao has already embarked on the path of harmony at that moment. In addition, Big White Goose knows a lot of things and it is of course beneficial for them to learn from each other's Taoism. Xiago suddenly said, I have learned, how can I still do things like this? Cui Dongshan held the back of his head with both hands and chuckled. After the heavy rain, it is indeed much easier to merge with the road, but the 14th realm is not like cabbage with yellow mud on the roadside. Xiago frowned. It's really difficult to break the situation and it's really sad to be worried. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, that's why I said just now that Feng Shuatao is expected to join Taoism, and Xianxia has murderous intentions towards fellow Taoist Qingmi. Am I right? Xiago admitted the matter openly. It's instinctive. There's nothing I can do about it, but I can control it. Pei Qian smiled and said, that's good. Cui Dongshan echoed, yes, our Xianxia is such an excellent Taoist talent. It is easy to learn anything. The harder it is, the faster we learn. There is still some room for improvement in sharpening our Taoist heart. I am a spectator. Those who are anxious are scratching their heads and ears and they are really envious. Xiago asked Pei Qian directly, isn't the big white goose swearing? If you stay in Lulu Mountain for a long time, you will find that many words have a strange appeal that others can learn quickly and become addicted to. For example, the nickname Big White Goose. Pei Qian said, whether it's cynicism, carrying a gun or a stick, or a shady and weird attitude, I can't tell the truth. Cui Dongshan said helplessly, conscience of heaven and earth, don't wrongly accuse good people. Xiago waved his hand, no problem, just take it as a good word. Cui Dongshan clasped his hands behind his back, walked around in circles, winked and said, shouldn't everyone in Tongjishou hope that Jiang sect master of the Jade Gui sect can one day join the Tao? Aquarius continent, doesn't everyone owe it to them? Am I the 14th realm? Shouldn't all the demon Qigong practitioners in the entire wild world hope that my husband will reach the 14th realm? Hey, it doesn't seem to be the case. Do you think it's strange? Xiago thought for a while and frowned. What are you talking about? It's none of my business. Cui Dongshan immediately imitated the millet grains. Pei Qian rolled his eyes, childish. Xiago left in a big way and Pei Qian wanted to go back to the house to practice boxing. Cui Dongshan called senior sister and started to hesitate. Pei Qian stopped and asked strangely, what's wrong? Cui Dongshan smiled and said, do you prefer the old Xiao Haitan or the current Pei Qian? Pei Qian was silent for a moment and said, I really didn't like the ignorant me before. Cui Dongshan said softly, anyway, my husband and I will often think of the old Xiao Haitan. Pei Qian smiled and said, did master tell you that? Cui Dongshan shook his head and said, no need to say. Regarding Pei Qian's growth, it seems that he is very happy and sad about it. Probably because I like Mr. Li, who is good at reasoning, but found that there was really no reason to explain this mood, so he had no choice but to remain silent. Just like a child jumping up and down, he turns into a big girl in the blink of an eye. After chatting some polite words and casual remarks, Qin Pingon returned to the ferry, walked towards them and asked with a smile, what are you talking about? The two of them spoke almost at the same time. The student said, senior sister wanted to drink secretly but I stopped her. The apprentice said, Big White Goose and Xianxia don't talk well. Qin Pingon smiled and nodded, saying very good, raised his hands and rewarded each with a chestnut. Cui Dongshan asked, Sir, are you going back to Luopa Mountain? Qin Pingon said, First I went to Wutong Mountain in Qingtong. I gave me a few Wutong leaves for free. I had to come to express my gratitude. Then I went to Qinghu Palace and had a drink with Mr. Lu. After that I went back home and continued to visit. Practice at Fiolu Dojo. Cui Dongshan said, Sir, you don't have to be so patient every time you go down the mountain. After all, going to Wutong Mountain is not just for that couple. The so-called smooth way does not mean that the master and disciple don't have to feel that they owe someone a favor. A little bit of patience on our part may determine the joys and sorrows of many people we meet. How dare we be impatient? Right? Qin Pingon stretched out his hand to hold Cui Dongshan's head and continued, It is because I met many patient people on the road that Qin Pingon is what he is today. Pei Qian hummed. Cui Dongshan sighed, The sky is big and the earth is big, sir, is the biggest. Everything you said is right. Qin Pingon said, I finally figured something out. Seeing that the opportunity was not good, Cui Dongshan ran away quickly, but Qin Pingon reached out to hold his head and said with a smile, There is no need to feel guilty or run away. Pei Qian thought for a while and was about to leave. The master and the junior brother must have a serious conversation and it would be a big deal. However, Qin Pingon signaled to Pei Qian not to move and said to them in his heart, "If I don't give an answer to a certain question before, someone will have to wait for the answer like you." Cui Dongshan said dully, "This is the old bastard's intention. I haven't thought about it for a few days." Qin Pingon joked, "So senior brother protecting my Taoism is equivalent to giving me an amulet invisibly. What do you, a student, feel guilty about?" The name of this amulet can probably be called Answer, which is about right and wrong, about process and result. Sword cultivator Qin Pingon is on the road of life. In the process of drawing talismans to find answers, Cui Dongshan is waiting patiently, and Zhou Zi is watching from the sidelines. Cui Dongshan muttered in a low voice, "The old doesn't bring toilet paper with him when he goes to the toilet." Qin Pingon laughed angrily and said, "Don't talk nonsense." Cui Dongshan asked, "It's okay anyway, why don't we have another session?" Qin Pingon said, "I don't care. Anyway, the amount of alcohol is there. What does Pei Qian say?" Pei Qian said, "My drinking capacity is average and I can't compare to master, and my wine quality is also ranked second." Cui Dongshan's eyes widened. "Shao Haitan, what do you mean, I'm the only one who dares to be the last in both worlds?" They returned to the wine table and Qin Pingon wanted to cook in person. He also said that Feng Zuido's cooking skills were sincere and not unusual. Pei Qian sat and waited, closing his eyes and concentrating, his eyebrows soft. Cui Dongshan was lying on the table yawning and shouting that he wanted to drink or eat meat. After tonight's dinner, the students and apprentices did not favor the husband and master. Instead, the senior sister and the junior senior brother worked together to get the one who drank the most and drank the best drunk. It seems that Qin Pingon told some interesting stories about being a kiln worker's apprentice. Big White Goose talked about some embarrassing things about being locked up and forced to study when he was young, and Little Haitan talked about some fun things about wandering around the capital of Nanyuan Kingdom when he was a child. Xiago felt that she was now a high-ranking official with a broad mind and a strong spirit, so she wanted to win over the two local sword cultivators from the Sword Qi Great Wall, but was rejected. She returned angrily but discouraged. "I went there again and tried to persuade the two sword fairies. Now that we are half family members, we had no enmity before, so there is no reason for our relationship to be stiff." The old woman listened to the chatter outside the door and began to chase people away with words. The girl in the mink hat made a face, knocked the door and walked away in a big way. She walked in the corridor and muttered something in a low voice, "Jade Pu Realm Sword Immortal ba ba ba." The old man in the room, who deliberately kept a straight face, almost didn't laugh out loud, but the old woman stood up immediately with a gloomy face, opened the door and angrily shouted, "Don't you dare say it again." As a result, the girl in the mink hat ran away long ago. The old man thought that his relationship with the girl was completely over, but he never thought that the old woman closed the door gently, returned to her seat, her face softened, she twitched her lips and smiled. The old man stared blankly at the old woman. She suddenly became angry and slapped the table. "What are you looking at? Old pervert, keep your eyes open." The old man was speechless. He could only curse in his heart. He was not young anymore. He had no self-awareness anymore. He could afford to buy a mirror. But somehow the old woman seemed to hear what the old man was saying. "You bad old man, you can't buy it. Put up a mirror, right?" The old man grinned and left the house. At the corner of the corridor, the girl in the mink hat said with a smile, "Sword Fairy Xingyun, she has such a bad temper. What do you like a woman like this to do?" The old man said angrily, "I'm happy to." Xiego laughed and said, "Yes." Xingyun was a little puzzled and couldn't help but ask, "The two worlds are starting to fight and you don't even want to help the wilderness just to come here to talk about love?" Xiego asked, "My true body is that of a young man, but I pretend to have the appearance of an old man. The sunset is infinitely beautiful. Isn't it fun?" Xingyun became angry with embarrassment and was about to scold him back, but Xiego started to stab him in the heart one after another. "This old boy has such a bad mouth. He didn't rinse his mouth after eating shit. No wonder Lu Shui doesn't like chatting with you. Take it easy, me Sword Immortal is much prettier than you. Are you men only allowed to covet beauty while women don't like handsome men? Me Xian is so eye-catching. What's more, he is a genuine Sword Immortal. He is not the same as your Yupu Sword Immortal. So much the same." Xingyun was so angry that the girl in the mink hat stood against the wall, stretched out her fingers and started to pick her nostrils. You're a swordsman, you're a coward and a coward, your swordsmanship is poor and you're even less courageous. The old woman came here, her face was livid and she yelled angrily, Bai Jing, shut up. Xiago put his hands on his hips and began to pose. How unreasonable, the ordinary offerings of the lower sect. But you are so ignorant of etiquette when you see the second offering of the upper sect? I am very popular on Lulu Mountain. When you two go there in the future, be careful not to eat it. Just walk around, don't say you didn't predict what you said. Xing Yun and Lu Shui were both very angry at first, but when they confronted the girl in the mink hat and heard such official talk, they felt extremely awkward. The key opponent is still the legendary Bai Jing, who handed over his sword whenever he disagreed. Xiago walked backwards in the corridor as if he was stern and was reminding me, a gentleman should always speak his words and fight with words rather than force. I'm afraid you will blackmail me for money. The old woman sneered in her heart and said, you should ask her about swordsmanship. When you were young, who was saying all day long that one day in the future, you would have to fight against the Ascension Realm demon. Xing Yun said aggrievedly, it's better to quarrel with her. After all, Bai Jing's pile of unused Taoist numbers were not given to her by someone kindly. I heard that when concubine Fei saw Bai Jing, she had to call her the patriarch according to her seniority, right? But the reason why there was no fight was actually because they all knew very well that the girl in the mink hat, who had a mouth that looked like she had eaten arsenic, had no ill intentions toward them. After thanking the dog for leaving, he put his hands behind his back, turned his nostrils to the sky, raised his shoulders and whistled. One is waiting for the other person to express his feelings, and the other feels that the other person knows his feelings. Don't say anything, just keep it for food. Is it delicious if it turns into sour rice? Alas, it was up to her, an outsider, to act as a villain to help them, and to pierce this layer of window paper. As the second-ranking minister in Lulu Mountain, I have nothing to say and must be promoted. The reason why Bai Jing risked the world's disapproval and left the wilderness was to do 3 things. Go to Luopa Mountain to find Xiaomo, recover the golden crow in Aquarius Continent and meet Pei Qian by the way. This time Xiago left Luopa Mountain because of 2 serious things. The first thing was of course that Xiaomo was not here, so she had to take on the responsibility of protecting the mountain owner. The second thing was that Xiago noticed the presence of Tongyi's Hao. There was a very familiar ancient atmosphere, but Xiago didn't want to reminisce with her for the time being. There is another new thing. Xiago is still hesitating whether to tell the mountain master that the old blind man who has nothing to pursue in the world, fellow Taoist priest of the temple, wants to go to heaven. Xiago remembered asking before, Mountain Master, do you really remember those place names or did you just make them up when you wrote them? Qin Pingon replied, I have a good memory since I was a child. The place names of those places are indeed the roads I have traveled. The mountains are stretching, but in the summer the main peak is covered with heavy snow. It is Wutong Mountain where the Patriarch Hall is located. Looking from a distance, the mountain looks like a silvery glazed world. Xiago smiled and said, This is also it's so beautiful. At first glance it looks like a place where monsters practice. Qin Pingon was sitting on a stone in a stream of a tributary of a large river, fishing with fishing rods made from local materials. Xiago followed him on this trip, and compared to the past, the girl in the mink hat obviously paid more attention to the inconspicuous scenery and local customs in various places. Qin Pingon joked, You are about to become a very good friend of mine. Xiago laughed loudly, knowing that it was Brother Su, the bearded hero who opened a martial arts school in Xianyu County. Qin Pingon was helpless as his relationship with Xiao Meili was indeed good. Xiago squatted aside, holding his chin with his hands and asked casually, When do you plan to refine the 5-color soil that Taoist Chunyang gave you? Qin Pingon said, Let's go back to Fiaofoot. Don't worry. Anyway, the soil from Izhou and Wuxia sent by the Dali Imperial Court has not been refined yet. Xiago smiled and said, I heard that Tong Shanjun helped me a little bit? Qin Pingon asked doubtfully, Does Xiao Meili even know this? Xiago said, I heard the news myself from Wei Yeo. There is a rumor circulating in the offices of Piyun Mountain that the Xia people are driving up prices and are unethical and did not communicate with the other gods beforehand. This has affected the chiefs of the other 4 mountains who are in charge of the 5-color soil. Need to work on a temporary basis. What's more, when it comes to the mountains, those who think of gods as immortals and smoke dry cigarettes have dark hearts. Qin Pingon smiled and said nothing. Xiego said, I often go there secretly to relax. I don't agree with the etiquette. It's not very good. Why don't the mountain master say a few words? Qin Pingon smiled and said, just pretend you don't know. Just pretend you didn't say it and I didn't hear it. Xiego asked, besides a few bags of Daoist 5-colored earth, what other treasures did Chunyang Daoist give you? Qin Pingon said, in short, it can help me work with the 5 elements natal objects to almost reach a point where I can't break the bottleneck. The Immortal realm has finished the things of the Ascension realm. Xiego praised, it's a big deal. If you lay the foundation in the early stage and then add more bricks and stones, you will get twice the result with half the effort. Qin Pingon said, Master Huolong reminded me not to always think about pursuing killing power. Cultivating the Tao is cultivating the Tao. If you are too ambitious and eager to eat tofu, it will easily burn your mouth. Xiego asked, so Lu Yan's talk of favors is due to Old Master's insinuation? Does Old Master want you to help Lu Yan protect the way, practice your skills, and reciprocate in the future to help his proud disciple protect the way? Qin Pingon laughed endlessly, I think it's really possible. Xiego said, I heard from Xiao Meili that the mountain master has known each other for a long time, the chivalrous swordsman Xianxia and the Taoist priest Zhang Shanfeng with cool sleeves? Qin Pingon nodded and said, we met when we were unknown and the 3 of us walked through the world together. But at that time traveling in the world was more worthy of the name and we had fun in hardship. Every time we had a drink we had to weigh our money bags carefully. I always felt that we had walked through the world together. It's a long, long way. It's not like today where you can travel leisurely. As long as you want to go fast, you can see thousands of miles of mountains and rivers in a blink of an eye, and you don't have to worry about the price of drinking. Xiego sighed, it's great to know a few close friends when I was young and can be lifelong friends. I envy them. Passing by some monks, they saw a man and a woman fishing by the river, and they began to speak fluently. Although the voice was not loud, the content was indeed a bit unpleasant. How could the skinny ones be chewy? The guy next to him must be a foodie. Of tender grass. Xiego whispered, Mountain Master, how am I doing now? If things had been in the past, haha, I would have turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. Qin Pingon nodded and said, I have a good temper now, but I was also very capable before. Xiego imitated the big white goose and shook his fists a few times. If you give me a prize, please give me a prize. Qin Pingon smiled and said, you can learn something from Sect Master Cui. If Qin Pingon hadn't stopped her, Xiego would have worn a long-sleeved robe when she went out this time. She felt that she looked more majestic when walking. Qin Pingon said curiously, it seems that I have never heard you mention the grudges and hatreds in the past years of practicing Taoism. When I occasionally chat with Xiaomo, he always talks vaguely. Xiego said cheerfully, there is nothing to talk about. I practice all by myself and work alone, so no Taoist priests were kind to me in the early years. I don't like to complain or grumble, and I occasionally suffer a few losses. Just knock out your teeth and swallow blood. As for those who have reason to blame me and hate me, they can't complain. You know it well, Lord of the Mountain. My old masters who had the reputation of eating ashes are all dead. Those who are alive among the earth immortals, those who can't beat me don't dare to blame me at all because they are afraid that I will steal their Taoist title. Of course, the Taoist priests who can't beat me don't have to blame me. As for enemies, I don't have any enemies. For later generations of women, it was better for Bai Jing to go out to dress up and change clothes. Every time she left the ashram and walked alone in the world, she would directly change her alias. Xiego said 3 words about grudges and hatred, but deliberately ignored them. The remaining word, love, was of course given to Xiaomo. It's like a love letter that lasts a long time but doesn't have many words. Xiego said abruptly, Qing Tong caused such a big fight, but ended up accepting such junk goods that can't be brought to the table? Master of the Mountain, don't let us Luopa Mountain be implicated. After all, it's you who can make Wutong Mountain a sect. Help me deliver the results to the Confucian Temple. When the time comes, I have to talk to Qing Tong, but don't stop me. Qin Pingon said slowly, it can be taught. No matter how lazy Qing Tong is, he still loves feathers. As long as he is willing to teach, be patient, and exercise more restraint, it will be a different situation. Take your time. Xiego asked, what if Qing Tong Jiao is not good? Qin Pingon said, there is still Dafu Academy watching. Thank you, dog. Although it was not the only way to go to Zhou Xian, a group of monks passed by this place soon. One of them, Jiao Didi, asked. The white hill in front is Wutong Mountain. Xiego rolled his eyes and shook his head. The prodigal hooves who knew what they were asking had huge breasts. Qin Pingon just stared at the water and said, no. Xiego couldn't help laughing. The female cultivator smiled brightly, rolled her eyes at the green-shirt figure and said, you handsome man with funny words, we may be from the same school in the future. Remember to take care of each other. Qin Pingan's answer can be described as concise and concise. No. Xiego laughed heartily. The group of demon monks who had gone to Wutong Mountain to try their luck found this conversation more interesting, and they all laughed and left. At first, when the local demon monks in Tongye Continent heard about this, they thought it was a trap carefully designed by some daring person to deceive them. Later, both Jade Guizhong and Pushun passed the Xianxia Di newspaper to prove that Wutong Mountain was the sect's first immortal mansion appointed by the Confucian Temple. But the demon clan, who have become accustomed to being frightened over the years, are still cautious and choose to maintain a wait-and-see attitude, not daring to approach the sycamore tree casually. When I learned that Cheng Longzhou, the chief of Dafu Academy who was born in Laojiao, was willing to climb the mountain in person to congratulate him, I began to trust Wutong Mountain. The academy has also set a rule that allows the demon monks to go to the nearby Xianxia God's mansion that has been enshrined by the imperial courts of various countries to receive a special customs certificate temporarily issued by the academy. It is also strictly forbidden for the monks from various countries along the way to stop them from going to Wutong Mountain. If there is a dispute, the academy will handle it personally. Only then did I feel completely relieved. Noisy rush over there. I was afraid that I would be late and not have a warm meal, as there would be no seats at the Wutongshan Patriarch Hall. Those who have come here recently have more or less the barbarian aura unique to the demon clan. Those who are at a lower level are even more fishy, and there are even some who have not yet fully refined themselves. Fortunately, we met each other in this world. We were not surprised at all but felt close to each other. Xiego asked curiously, what did Qing Tong think? He just changed his Taoist name to Qingyu and claimed to the public that he was only in the Jade Pu realm. Since he chose to establish a sect in an upright way, why did he lower his identity and pretend to be a Jade Pu realm? Didn't you take off your pants and fart? Qin Pingon explained, Qing Tong is very interested in establishing a sect, but he doesn't have much confidence in how to handle the affairs of the sect. He is more worried that once the number of genealogy monks increases over time, he will get used to having an Ascension Realm monk as the sect leader. Environment, he was afraid that people's hearts would be insufficient, and he yearned for the state of unpredictable emperor's heart, so he came up with a step-by-step trick. First of all, a young Yu Pu who was born out of the blue is not light in his own right. The demon clan Qi practitioner can still get the nod from the Confucian Temple to establish a sect in Tongyi's Hao. From the perspective of others, there must be something interesting here which is intriguing. Secondly, Qing Tong only needs 100 or 200 years before he can claim to be in seclusion again. Successfully emerged from seclusion and became an immortal, which is enough to prove that he is a promising young sect leader. And then Xiego said first, then after 100 years Qing Tong pretends to be in the Ascension Realm? No, this is not a pretense. After thinking for a moment, Xiego asked, is this the truth that Jing Qing said, don't set your tone too high when doing things? Qin Pingon turned his head and looked at the girl in the mink hat. I thought you were starting to learn from Qin Lingjun how to behave in the world. Xiego asked in confusion, what's wrong? Qin Pingon turned his head to look at the river again and let her go. Xiego continued the previous topic. But according to this process, won't Qing Tong's secrets be revealed in 500 or 600 years? He will have to become an Ascension Realm sect master. Qin Pingon said, who said you can achieve enlightenment and ascend in just one retreat? It's normal to fail once or twice. Xiego's eyes widened. Qing Tong, this is more extreme than taking off his pants and farting, it's just pooping without taking off his pants. I understand. Qing Tong has such a dirty mind that he came up with such a harmful trick. Damn it, I used to think he was an ignorant idiot. Well, it turns out that even I was deceived. Maybe he couldn't reach the 14th realm on purpose? Maybe he's already the 14th realm. No, I have to ask him face to face. If he is still not honest and dares not to acknowledge the 14th realm, I will ask Jian to reveal his true colors. Qin Pingon smiled and said, is it possible that you misunderstood Qing Tong? Maybe there is some advice from an expert? Of course, I also guessed. Xiago was not fooling around in Luo Luo Mountain for nothing. He immediately changed his words and said, "What a clever trick, it must be someone behind the scenes who is giving guidance." Qin Pingon was speechless for a moment. "Good guy, you will soon learn the advantages of everyone in Luolu Mountain." Xiago said something with emotion for no reason. For those who practice Taoism, when they look at the ordinary masters at the foot of the mountain, it seems that it is difficult to treat them as human beings, and it is also difficult for them to treat themselves as human beings. In short, it is difficult for the former to regard the latter as the same kind. It was obvious that Xiago would not regard Qing Tong and those monsters who refine the human form as comrades. Qin Pingon didn't say anything about this, but just tried to persuade him for no reason. "Over there in Lolu Mountain, you don't have to be polite and polite. No one treats you as an outsider. It's awkward for you to make such a fuss." Xiago was a little confused. "I blurt out my knowledge and my accumulated talents are like a spring flowing out. When the words come to my mouth, I can't stop them at all. I don't feel awkward at all, and neither do others. Mountain Master, is it my imagination?" Qin Pingon became increasingly helpless and could only say perfunctorily, Okay, it's not an illusion. Put away the fishing rod and Diablo basket, put them back together, and continue on your way to the ancestral mountain." Xiago said cheerfully, "Mountain Master, do we look like the inspectors of the 8 prefectures in the drama who visit privately incognito and understand the people's sentiments? Just straw sandals and bamboo sticks, a bit shabby." Qin Pingon said, "As long as you are happy." Xiago glanced at the mountains and said, "There are so many empty hills. Feels like the territory is bigger than Lulu Mountain and Qingping Sword Sect combined. This guy Qing Tong is really happy with his achievements." Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "Why do you always target fellow youths?" Xiago curled his lips and said, "The Ascension of Waste deserves me to target him." Qin Pingon said nothing. Xiago said, "Mountain Master, as per the old rules, it's better to pretend that I didn't say anything and you didn't hear it." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I can pretend that I didn't hear you. If you can, don't say such things." Someone with a bright mind actually built a temporary shop next to the main road of Shandao. The various Xinjia wines sold here are purchased in bulk from other ferries. Once they are resold, the price is slightly higher, so you can definitely make a profit. Business, after all, the customers come here to seek a future, and their words and deeds may be under the eyes of the Jade Sect Master. The wine shop was overcrowded. Xiago picked an empty table in the corner and ordered a pound of loose wine, 2 pounds of braised pork and a few dishes to go with the wine. The previous groups of monks passing by the river happened to be drinking and chatting here, and the charming woman looked at him. As soon as the light came on, he was about to start a conversation and joke with the man in green shirt, but Xiago was not happy. He bent his fingers and pointed at his own eyes and that of the naughty bitch. Xiago held up his mink hat and complained in a low voice, "The price is so expensive, it's just a pig killing." Xiago is not very lavish when it comes to money expenses, otherwise she would not have been able to set up a stall selling medicinal materials and mountain products when she first entered Houran Tianxia. Qin Pingon said nothing. Xiago then remembered that the owner of the mountain was in the same company as the shopkeeper, an expert in selling wine. She felt a little resentful, crossed her arms across her chest, closed her eyes and rested. The wine shop was noisy and some monks even started to punch each other. Xiago felt that their voices were about to blow off the roof, but it was not a big problem, because Xiago was eyeing someone who had a wine table to himself and refused to share the table with anyone. A dull young man with a long sword sheathed in jet black dragon skin lying across the table. The young man was drinking alone with an indifferent expression. His demeanor was as if a flag was standing behind him, and the 4 characters "defiant" were written on the list. Xiago said in his heart, "Mountain Master, this sword is quite old. The method of making the sword is an old craft. I can't remember it clearly, but it looks familiar." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "It is undoubtedly an old thing. Although this person is not at a high level, his Tao Qi is condensed and he has a return to nature. If nothing else, Qing Tong should reuse this person." After drinking, he became more and more arrogant. In addition to talking about the excavation of Dadu, he also talked about many so-called inside stories and truths from hearsay, such as Qingmi joining the Jade Guizhong, Huangting retreat in Tapingshan, and a recent event in Pushun Yunkatang. Martial arts competitions, etc. were all mentioned. and some people scolded the Tongye sect for turning against the monster clan in the face of battle. Xiago is not interested in any of these. The only thing what makes me feel so good is that it has something to do with my own mountain. Some people say that the man named Qin in Beipingzu is not arrogant in his hometown. The reason why he came to Tongyi's Hao to dig the big road is because he wants to compete with Daquan. In order to please the empress, she took the opportunity to suppress the Tongye sect, which had an old grudge against her, so that the latter could completely close down the mountain and never be able to hold his head high again. Xiago pricked up his ears, only regretting that there were not many detailed descriptions, and found that the mountain owner looked at him with a half-smile. Xiago hurriedly pretended to drink, but luckily Xiao Mili and Daoist fellow Daoist Kong Ho were not here. Those were the two big ears of Luopa Mountain to repay the gods. Qin Pingon glanced outside the door. Soon a man and woman came over. They looked like husband and wife, but because the woman was a pure martial artist, she appeared to be older than the man who was a monk. The man looked at the wine table in the wine shop and recognized at a glance that the guy with the sword on the table was not easy to mess with, so he walked towards the corner wine table with two empty seats. He walked up to Qin Pingon, spoke in poor Tong Yezhou Yayan, cupped his fists and asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, can we share a table?" Qin Pingon replied in his mellow Beiju Luzhou dialect, "Of course." The woman frowned slightly, but the man sat down directly and said with joy on his face, "How can I meet a fellow Taoist here? Do you also come here to practice?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "I have to fight for my life with my feet." Someone among the drinkers seemed to have recognized the identity of the couple and began to whisper. It turned out that there was a foreign female martial artist who was not weak in fists and kicks. She wanted to use the mountaintop realm to fight with the Pushun who was said to have reached the level of the ultimate realm. Huang Yiyun asked about the boxing. For some reason the competition in Pushun was not behind closed doors, but also open, so there were many spectators. But what was really talked about the most afterwards was not how wonderful the fight between the two female martial arts masters was. After all, there was no suspense about the outcome, but there was a rumor that people had noses and eyes. It was said that someone with sharp eyes saw one of the onlookers in Pushun. There was a man in a green shirt who was the young hidden official named Qin from Aquarius continent. The number of people watching the mirrored flowers water moon suddenly increased, and Pushun quickly closed the mirrored flowers water moon. In fact, Qin Pingon was in retreat at Fiolu Dojo, and of course he did not go to Pushun to watch the battle. The customers in the store carefully observed the woman, and they were sure that she was the unknown martial arts master who had fought with Yi Yunyun. Some people talked about Qin Pingon who was watching the battle in Pushun and made a comment. "If we were face to face, I might still respect him a little. But since we are in a mirror, I have to say that he is not interested." Hearing these kind words, Xiago grimaced. This guy must be a talented person. There was a mature and prudent demon monk in the store. He couldn't help it. He slapped the table and said in a deep voice, "Stop making noise. There are all these people who are just good at talking and don't know whether to live or die. What's the situation in the world now? I'm really not afraid." After being listened to by someone who is interested, he complained to the academy to ask for credit. That Qin surnamed, if he only has Luo Luoshan, that's it. Now the next sect is in Tongyi's Hao. Who knows if there is a Qingping sword sect here now? An eyeliner? I said I wasn't. Do you dare to believe it? I said I was. Do you dare not believe it? As soon as these words came out, the noisy wine shop suddenly became silent. Qing Tong's previous worry that he was not happy for Qin Pingon to reveal his identity and show off during his visit to the mountains was somewhat justified. The shadow of the famous tree, the last hidden official of the Sword Qi Great Wall, really wants to come to the boundary of Wutong Mountain. No matter what the superficial reason for visiting the mountain is, I am afraid that all the local demon monks in Tongye continent will be scattered, without a place to live, and is a huge fortune comparable to wealth and life? If Qin Pingon really has murderous intentions, wouldn't there be military exploits waiting to be picked up everywhere in the Wutong Mountain world? Wutong Mountain has become a hot pot restaurant, and the man named Qin comes and takes away one pot. Qin Pingon couldn't help but glance at the old man. The latter noticed his gaze and nodded in greeting. In the whole room, the man in green shirt was the only one who was careless. He didn't talk much and just drank. He looked young, but he was still relatively young. "Steady," Xiago said from his heart. "Mountain Master, the old man praises you in his heart. No wonder people say that our Mountain Master's relationship with the elders has always been very good." Qin Pingon said angrily, Then you can make a toast for me and say thank you? Qin Pingon laughed with the couple from his heart and said, I have seen the two of you competing in the ring at Tili Mountain before. I never thought that you would become a Taoist couple. I am very happy to congratulate you. When Qin Pingon visited Luzhou in Beiju for the first time, Huang Shi, a wild cultivator, and Xiaonyang, a martial artist, had a life-and-death battle. Two of Qin Pingan's friends, Lu Jinglong and Huang Guan, also had a sword-fighting ceremony to sign a life-and-death certificate on the other side of Toli Mountain. In fact, the Dali court had previously thought of recruiting this embroiderer to make up for the 12 earthly branches. But in the end, Zhou Haijing was chosen, which was relatively more suitable. Qin Pingon picked up the wine bowl and said, back in the days of Dili Mountain, Huang Xian master's techniques were numerous and closely connected. He was able to melt dozens of immortal methods into one furnace, which was eye-opening. At least I was watching the battle from a distance and I felt that I had benefited a lot. Later when I was traveling I often thought about it over and over again. Your lady moved like a dragon with her fists and she was so majestic that she never failed to catch up. She had the style of a master and I was fascinated by it. I just took this opportunity to meet you and have a drink in a foreign land, and I would like to pay tribute to you too. Huang Shi laughed endlessly, but he didn't take these kind words seriously, but he still filled up the wine and drank a bowl on the spot. The taciturn Xiaonyang just picked up the wine bowl and took a sip of wine. Putting down the wine bowl, Huang Shi burped and asked, Brother, are you traveling to Wutong Mountain, or are you seeking refuge with the Jade Sect Master? Qin Pingon said, let's take a look at the situation here. Huang Shi nodded and said, that's right. Recording names on the Golden and Jade genealogy is not just about finding an inn to rest. It's not a trivial matter. You have to be careful. Qin Pingon nodded, that makes sense. This time it was Huang Shi who picked up the wine bowl and said, we're in love, let's take one. Qin Pingon smiled and clinked the bowl with him, meeting is fate, that's all. Huang Shi drank quickly and violently and soon became a little red-faced. Just when Xiaonyang wanted to persuade her, her man began to talk to others casually. To be honest, I have some connections here in Wutong Mountain. There is a good friend, his realm is not very high, but his achievements in swordsmanship will be very high. Now that Wutong Mountain is hiring, I believe he can become a member of the front seat of the Patriarch Hall. If you still decide to settle here in case if you encounter difficulties, you can ask him for help. Of course it's best not to have this in case. The embroiderer sighed softly. He is always the same, talking to people when he likes to see them. There is always a reason to say that his intuition is very accurate. Whether it is worth keeping friends or not can be determined at a casual glance. However, Xiaonyang did not stop her, partly because she had confidence in her husband's cultivation and her own martial arts attainments. It was enough for a Jade Pu realm monk and a mountain-top realm martial artist to travel around Tongye continent and not take the initiative to cause trouble. The other half of the reason is that she thinks the girl in the mink hat who is patronizing the braised meat is cute when she occasionally raises her head, her eyes are blank and her cheeks are flushed. After chatting a lot about the current situation of Luzhou and Beiju, Huang Shi sat cross-legged on a bench. From my hometown to here, not to mention the Aquarius Island in the middle, Xianxia is being talked about everywhere now. It made my ears get calloused. This guy is naturally very powerful, but if you really think about it, he is an arrow-stomping person after all. The man in green shirt seemed to feel something when he heard the words and nodded and said, when you are in the world, reputation is one thing. You can't live without it, nor can it be too high. If your virtue is not matched, your reputation will not be worthy of it. The more false reputations you have, the more you build a snowman and never see the light of day. When Xiaonyang heard this, she felt that even if this person just said a few words, he was still pretty good. Huang Shi hesitated for a moment, and just wanted to tell his new drinking buddy the inside story, and persuade him to join the Yu-Pu realm Qingyu Patriarch, if he could. There was no need to move away because the founder of the sect with the Taoist name Qingyu, it is inextricably related to Tongyi's Hao Town Demon Tower. It's just that this time the embroidered lady didn't get used to her man. She stepped on the back of Huang Zai's shoe under the table, and twisted the toe of the embroidered shoe hard to remind him not to act recklessly. After drinking some wine, I don't know the heights of the world. At the foot of someone else's dojo, casually revealing a monk's Taoist roots at the top of the mountain, do you think it is a trivial matter that can be overcome by drinking a few bowls of fine wine? What's more, your friend will continue to practice Taoism here for a long time. If he doesn't consider his own safety, he won't think about your friend. Fortunately, after Xianxia hesitated, he felt that the matter was inappropriate and swallowed his words with the wine. Xianxia complained to his wife from the bottom of his heart, saying that he was not drunk and knew better. The embroiderer didn't say anything. Xianxia became ill and began to drink. Xianyang is accustomed to this. The men around her always say that when they have conflicts with others, they must kill decisively and eradicate their enemies. But in daily life, you still have to be soft-hearted. This kind of man has a lot of minor problems. Of course Xianyang still has it. Like it. When she thought of this, the woman who was not good at words softened her eyebrows. The embroiderer noticed that the girl in the mink hat raised her head and grinned at her. The embroiderer was stunned for a moment and then smiled back at the charming girl. She guessed in her mind that she was the daughter of the man in green shirt. Father and daughter don't look alike. Xianxia stood up to say goodbye and the man in green shirt stood up and said with a smile, "I must treat this drink." Xianxia is a sweet-tempered person, so he is generous and casual. Besides, Xianxia had many chi practitioners and women who admired him in Luzhou Beiju. The embroiderer has personally driven away many flowers and butterflies over the years. Xianxia Xiao asked, "I still can't help it. Let me ask you a final question. Before I drank, what were the first few sentences that were of great benefit? I pondered over and over again. Are they true or false?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Say more polite words at the table and less unintentional words outside the table." Although it was said that it was not said, the answer was still vague. Xianxia still thought it was good. "We both know how to drink." The embroiderer noticed that the girl in the mink hat blinked her eyes, as if she had endured the same problem. She said in a low voice, "My father not only drinks wine but also sells wine." Xianxia looked strange for a moment. "No wonder he is willing to treat me." The embroiderer smiled sweetly. Xiaonizi is so simple, so her father must not be a serious person. The couple walked towards the door of the store, but they never thought that the young swordsman who occupied the table would also get up and put the drink money on the table. The young swordsman sneered and said, "Master Zhou Xian has many friends. You don't have to pay when you go out to drink." Xianxia said proudly, "I just met him and he is a fellow countryman. He respects me very much. It has nothing to do with my level or fame. He just thinks I have a good character." Xianyang did not dispel her man's bragging but reminded her, "Did you forget one thing? People treat you to a drink. Are you embarrassed?" Xianxia slapped his head and then remembered something. He turned around and asked in his heart, "By the way, brother, I've been busy drinking and I forgot to ask your name." I'm sorry. The green shirt customer who was checking out at the counter turned his head when he heard this and said with a smile, "My pseudonym is Chao Mo and my real name is Qin Pingon. If nothing else, he is the arrow-stomping person you mentioned." Xianxia was stunned for a moment and soon stopped laughing. He pointed at him and said, "Sure enough, I'm drunk. I'm the biggest in the world. We have the same taste. Let's have another drink if we have a chance." Qin Pingon nodded and said cheerfully, "No problem." Xiego turned her back to the door and pressed her cheeks hard with both hands. She was afraid that she would laugh out loud. After walking out of the liquor store and starting to climb the mountain, Xianxia was silent for a long time and asked curiously, "Why do you two act like nothing is wrong?" The embroiderer asked doubtfully, "Otherwise, it was just a chance encounter. For example, in Luzhou Beiju, they had met an old Taoist priest who claimed to be the real person of Pa Di Peak Fire Dragon. The key was more than once." The young swordsman said angrily, "When we were in Pushan earlier, many people mistakenly thought I was Qin Pingon." Xianxia was already sweating profusely. He tugged at his collar and said with a wry smile, "The problem is that you don't take him seriously, but he is really the same person." The embroiderer just shook her head in disbelief. Xianxia had no choice but to explain, "I have had a weird magical power since I was a child. I can see a certain kind of Taoist aura in others. The higher the Taoism and the more spiritual aura, the aura will be like the true body of O, or the higher the monk's appearance. You all know it, and at the same time you can roughly judge the purity and turbidity of other people's aura." Xianyang said doubtfully, "Then you should have recognized him as Qin Pingon from the beginning. Why should you feel nervous when you go out?" The young swordsman smiled and said, "Sister, this is called talking while drunk. It seems that we really hit it off during the previous conversation." It turns out that he is Xianyang's younger brother. In Huangzai's words, this boy's eyes are on his forehead. He has such a famous brother-in-law who is famous all over the continent. He doesn't take it seriously. He also says that the Jade Sword Immortal has no power at all. Qualified to be his preacher. In the small golden elixir realm, his tone is as big as the sky. Xianxia had no choice but to talk to this arrogant brother-in-law. In the beginning he was indeed very light and low profile, almost the same as a Qi practitioner from Dongfu or Guanhai realm, but he stood at the counter of the shop when he answered the question. There was a magical sight in an instant. The embroiderer frowned and said, "A monk's statue has become higher than Wutong Mountain?" Xianxia shook his head and said, "If it was just like this I wouldn't be so rude. The truth is gone, not even a trace, not at all." The last page of my ancient family book records this mysterious scene, called "The real person is face to face but does not know each other, but the Taoist transformation of heaven and earth is just a stone's throw away." Xianxia had never met that person before, so with Huang Zai's character, even if they met and knew that the other person was Chen Pingon, it would be nothing. What really made Xianxia nervous was the Taoism of the other person. Xianxia sat down on the steps. The young swordsman turned around and walked down the mountain without saying a word. The embroiderer asked worriedly, "What to do?" The young swordsman said in a deep voice, "Be my disciple." Xianxia hesitated to speak. The embroiderer thought for a while but still didn't stop her brother from going to the mountain. Xianxia asked, "Xianyang, this guy Deng Jianpain has always wanted to become a disciple of Chen Pingon. How come I don't know about it at all? Last time we passed by Aquarius Continent, why didn't he go to Luopa Mountain?" The embroiderer said helplessly, "It's not like you don't know. Jianping never tells me anything about what's on his mind." Xianxia smiled and said, "That's right. As long as I say a few more words to you, brat, you will feel like celebrating the new year. I can't help it, I found it myself. Good wife, among the three of them Xianxia is the last one. Xianyang's real name is Deng Jianxiao. The two siblings were orphaned at a very young age and depended on each other for their lives. In fact, Deng Jianxiao also had Taoist qualifications at the beginning, but eventually became a pure martial artist because she gave up on Taoism at the beginning of mountain climbing. She forcibly dispersed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with a breath of pure qi, breaking many acupoints. Many times when things come to a head, there is no choice but to have both ends. The two siblings went through a bleak period when they were young. However, Xianyang did not mention these specific details of the past, and Deng Jianpain was even more mute. The embroiderer said, "I don't know either. He went out for training back then and started to retreat when he returned to the mountain. If I asked him, he wouldn't say anything. He just said that he went down the mountain to get to the mountain." After that trip, Deng Jianpain became a different person. Before, the siblings finally had a stable share of the family business in the mountain dojo. However, Deng Jianpain was very undisciplined in his spiritual practice and sword training, and wasted his time. Deng Jianxiao was a child since childhood. She felt sorry for her younger brother the most, so of course she wouldn't say anything. Fortunately, during that trip, Deng Jianpain began to practice Taoism seriously. In addition, he had a good sister who gave him everything he asked, so he was able to refine swords very quickly and his level rose very quickly. Later, Xianxia often teased Xianyang. Fortunately, Deng Jianpain had a good foundation. Otherwise, if he followed your doting method and didn't follow the rules of being a sister and followed him in everything, he would have become a lawless and harmful party. "The dandy boy." The embroiderer would reply with a smile on her face, without even looking at whose younger brother it was. However, during that experience, Deng Jianpain also brought back two children with frostbitten hands and took them as his direct disciples. Xianxia and Xianyang knew this matter clearly after they became Taoist monks. They also knew that the two children were born in poor families and that their parents sold charcoal to make a living. As for where their hometown is, they said that Xianxia had forgotten the specific name. It seems to be a small country southeast of Beiju Luzhou, a village outside some city. When they met Xianxia, they had already lived in the mountains and practiced Taoism for some years, and had grown into a young man and a graceful girl respectively. But even if they become Taoist monks on the mountain, they still seem to like to talk about things from their childhood. For example, they often go to the city with their father in a bullock cart, go to the market or New Year's Eve, sell charcoal in exchange for money and have new clothes, new shoes. Although their qualifications were extremely average, Deng Jianqing still valued his master very much, and he did not hesitate to spend a lot of resources. Deng Jianqing no longer even had the intention to accept disciples, saying that having a first disciple and a closed disciple was enough. Shi didn't think much about this, let alone ask any questions. He just thought that it was this cold-faced and warm-hearted brother-in-law who saw the two children suffering from the same illness on the way back then, and felt compassion for them, so he took them back to the mountains. The embroiderer said softly, "Actually, Jianping is very satisfied with your brother-in-law, but he is too shy to say it." Shi smiled and said, "You know, it's not like one family doesn't come into the same house." The embroiderer said, "Is it okay to lose my apprenticeship so rashly?" Shi smiled and said, "I don't know if it will work or not. I'm just sure that Jianping went the wrong way. He shouldn't have gone down the mountain to be a disciple. He has to go up the mountain to find the master." The embroiderer quickly figured out the connection and became worried. She is always so single-minded and short-sighted. How can I find a wife in the future? Shi said, "We don't have to worry about this. This kid is very lucky." As expected, the young swordsman returned to the mountain road with a sad expression and sat next to his sister. Deng Jianqing scolded himself for being a fool. He should have taken notice of the green bamboo staff when he saw it. Shi joked, "I'm usually quite clever." The embroiderer gave him an elbow, but it didn't do anything at all, and she was still making sarcastic remarks. Deng Jianping didn't take it seriously but looked sad. Shi asked, "When I passed by last time, why didn't you go to Lulu Mountain to have a look? I heard that the mountain was closed and you thought you would be rejected? Why don't you go and ask for trouble?" Deng Jianping said, "At that time I felt ashamed and felt that I was not qualified to climb that mountain to meet him." Shi fell silent and Xianxia gave her another elbow, signaling to continue asking. He was also curious. Shi had no choice but to continue asking, "Is it because you are a sword cultivator and he has the title of hidden official? Because he has made great achievements in the Great Wall of Sword Qixi, take a special look at him?" Deng Jianping shook his head, "It's not for these reasons." Shi said sternly, "Jianping, then I'm even more surprised. You've never been the kind of person who admires anyone with a higher level. Why do you want to be your disciple alone? If I remember correctly, Bai Shang has gained it. Your idea of becoming a disciple was just rejected by you." Deng Jianping remained silent. "There are some injustices that we are accustomed to. No matter heaven or earth, gods or gods, I don't care. After Deng Jianping, learned the sword to a small degree, I decided to mind my own business. I am willing to follow the footsteps of those who came before me and go straight on the road regardless of my life." Shi asked, "Since you refused to go to Luopa Mountain in Aquarius Continent, why did you change your mind temporarily after meeting him today?" Deng Jianping became anxious and cursed, "I'm a stubborn person but am not a heartless fool. Why didn't I see you when you could see me? Why did you miss out on being a disciple in person?" Shi and Xianxia looked at each other and smiled. Qin Pingon did indeed meet the Qingyu Patriarch on Wutong Mountain, in a library that seemed to be hidden in a cloud cave. In the mountain of books, Qin Pingon took out a book from time to time and doubled it. Qing Tong next to him looked as if he was looking for a thief, which made Qin Pingon a little bit overwhelmed. Qing Tong said, "Then let's do whatever you want and chat somewhere else." Xiego began to shake his head and whistle. "If you continue to be so arrogant, I will clear you up. Nowadays I not only like reading books, but the owner of the mountain also praised my landscape travel notes for being simple and unpretentious. From what I heard, I wonder if there will be a chance for it to be published as a book." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "How can the master persuade the guest to do as he pleases?" Having said that, he still put the books in his hands back to their original places. Together they walked to the corridor outside the building. Qin Pingon talked about what he had seen and felt. He said that it was really good for fellow Daoist Qing Tong to establish a sect here. Those demon monks, no matter what they talked about in their words or on their faces and eyes, in their originally gray world, now seemed to have a bright brilliance. "At least I dare to look forward to tomorrow, regardless of whether I will be disappointed tomorrow." Naturally, Qing Tong used landscape restriction in the library. They walked to the railing and Qin Pingon tentatively asked, "Would you like to introduce you to these two guest friends?" Qing Tong clicked his tongue and said, "It can't be the two guys I saw before, right?" Qin Pingon was really not thin-skinned. With a hearty smile, "What a coincidence." Qing Tong said indifferently, "It's easy to handle. It's a small matter for a government office somewhere in the mountains to add 2 sets of bowls and chopsticks." Qing Tong asked, "By arranging them like this, Master Yin Guan won't feel that he is not proud enough, right?" Qin Pingon smiled and said, I think it's a great honor to be able to talk about small things with big people. Qing Tong and Xiego said in unison, irony? Xiego was so angry that he and Qing Tong wanted to go there together. He wished he could eat those 2 words to satisfy his stomach. Qin Pingon took out his tobacco stick and started puffing away smoke. Qing Tong said, I heard that the mountain master is good at naming. I have something to ask of you. Xiego twitched his lips. Then you have really found an expert. Qin Pingon smiled and said, easy to say. Qing Tong said, Wutong Mountain has a total of 96 peaks, more than 200 large palaces and pavilions, 39 large ridges between the peaks, 18 caves and grottos suitable for spiritual practice, 12 bamboo seas and peach forests. There are 3 large rivers, 16 mountain streams, more lakes, ponds and waterfalls, and all kinds of cliff carvings and stone monuments are needed. Qin Pingon choked on the dry smoke and coughed. He quickly said, I'll talk about it next time. I happen to have something to do and I have to go to the Qinghu Palace in Qingjing Mountain immediately to make an appointment. Qing Tong laughed and said, what a coincidence. Qin Pingon sighed, who says it's not the case? Qing Tong saw 3 people climbing the mountain together on the main road of Zhou Xian, the Shinto road. Among them, the young swordsman among them hurriedly went down the mountain. In his own realm, Qing Tong was in the Ascension realm. Not to mention the content of his words, he could even hear the monk's thoughts, but he was too lazy to do so. The gate of Wutong Mountain is open. It doesn't matter who you are, what your status and background are, and what kind of monastic qualifications you have. Come and go as you please. Xiego complained, fellow Taoist Qing, you are the host. As a guest, I just give you a suggestion. Don't always speak in a weird way. It will hurt people. I won't come next time. Qing Tong was a little surprised. When did Sword Cultivator by Jing become so talkative? The clouds gather and disperse outside the building, just like the separation in life. Qing Tong wanted to say goodbye to the guests, but he never thought that Qin Pingon didn't move, so Xiego just lay on the railing and waited patiently. On the other side of the mountain road, Xianyang said softly, Giant Pain, my brother-in-law just said when you came down the mountain that person is probably in the mountain right now. Let's see if we can help you introduce him to him. Huang Shi patted his chest and said, for the sake of my brother-in-law's great future, I am a brother-in-law, so I am naturally brave enough to say a few words of kindness to my new friend to ask for help. For some reason, Huang Shi found that the atmosphere was not right. First, Xianyang fell silent, and then Deng Jianpain turned slightly sideways and began to be in a daze. Huang Shi was a little confused but still asked in her heart, Xianyang, did I say something wrong? Can I make amends with Jianping? Xianyang, who was sitting between the 2 of them, had gentle eyes and patted his arm gently. No, don't think about it. Huang Shi was even more shocked after that. From the corner of his eye, he noticed that Deng Jianpain had a wrinkled face, his mouth was open and his face was full of tears, but he never cried or couldn't cry. The embroiderer wanted to speak several times, but she didn't know how to comfort her brother, so her eyes turned red. She choked up first, maybe because she was distressed or wronged. Who knows? Deng Jianpain took a deep breath without wiping the tears on his face and said in a trembling voice, Sister, I have been sorry for you since I was a child, so after you killed those beasts and brought me to live a stable life, I will still deliberately not practice well. Because it seems that every higher level, it proves that I am less of a thing. Later, after I learned some swordsmanship, I thought I could put aside the relationship with the past. As a result, I escaped again in a place called Suijia City. At that time when I saw the 2 children on the street, I felt close to them as if I were seeing ourselves. Later, the 2 children were kept in the dark and were still standing next to the bullock cart. They just looked at me and I looked away. After they were killed, the disaster was about to fall on my head, so I fled alone. What was wrong? It seemed that anyone could escape, so why couldn't I? But I felt that only Deng Jianpain couldn't. I couldn't deceive myself. The young swordsman gently beat his heart again and again. Sister, I feel uncomfortable. For so many years I feel that I am doing everything wrong. Practicing sword is wrong, eating and drinking is wrong, everything is wrong. Sister, you have it's even more wrong for someone like me to be a younger brother. I'm sorry. Deng Jianpain stopped talking as if he was extremely disappointed and relieved, and handed the long sword to his sister. Deng Jianxiao didn't dare to take back the sword. She subconsciously turned to look at her man. Huang Zai's eyes were firm and he nodded, Just keep it for Jianping first. The woman took the long sword and choked with tears. Huangshi, what should I do? Why is it like this? Huangshi replied softly, I haven't seen him before. I can still hide and deceive myself. When I actually meet him, I know that I can't escape. I think it's good. It's not a bad thing in the long run. Deng Jianping stood up and went down the mountain first. The young swordsman walked in front both up and down the mountain. The embroiderer asked softly, Is everything okay? Huangshi wiped her tears and said softly, Believe me, it's okay. Xiaonyang, when did I lie to you? Xiaonyang nodded, but then said something silly that made Huangshi dumbfounded. Do you think if we go to ask Chen Pingon will he agree even if Jianping becomes an anonymous disciple? Huangshi was depressed and distressed, so he could only say, Becoming a master or a disciple on the mountain involves the Dharma lineage. How can it be child's play? The embroiderer glanced at Deng Jianping's desolate back, and instantly felt a mixture of emotions and sadness. She didn't think her life was hard before, but it was only at this moment that Deng Jianxiao felt that life was really hard. Huangshi clenched his hands into fists and placed them gently on his knees. He raised his eyes and looked into the distance. It seemed that when he was young, all the teenagers felt that if the mountain could not come to them, I would be there. If I could go to the mountains, I would be able to accomplish many things. He remembered a gatha for no reason. When people walk on a bridge, the water on the bridge does not flow. Probably all the difficulties and sufferings in life are caused by people walking on the bridge. When people cross the bridge is always there, making people dare not look back and look at the way they came. When Deng Jianping reached the foot of the mountain, he seemed to have calmed down and wanted to turn around and call his sister and brother-in-law to go home. The young man forced a smile and was about to say hello, but was stunned for a moment. Further up the mountain road, I saw a man in a green shirt standing with his hands in his sleeves and a gentle smile. The man asked, The situation has come to an end. Are you no longer a disciple? Deng Jianping hesitated for a moment and nodded, I don't want to be a disciple anymore. I just want to thank Qin Jianxian Dao in person for my 2 disciples. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Then I'd like to thank you too. Deng Jianping was confused. Qin Pingon said, I may not believe many of the truths I have said, but at least there is one truth in them. Today's Jindan realm swordsman Deng Jianping lets me know that it is right. Deng Jianping asked, What's the point? Qin Pingon smiled and said, You don't lack this truth, you don't need to know. Deng Jianping was a little embarrassed. Sure enough, was it difficult to say a few more words to him? But Qin Pingon quickly added, What you lack is swordsmanship and realm. You lack a master who can both reason and teach swordsmanship. Deng Jianping was completely stunned. Wearing a green shirt, he walked slowly down the mountain. The sword fairy's sleeves were swaying slightly as if in the spring breeze. Deng Jianping refused to become a disciple, but Qin Pingon was willing to accept a disciple. Sword of Coming Chapter 1133. The white clouds are like formations and the mountains are as deep as the sea. There are no guests here, just a few glasses of wine. Whether the flowers are blooming or the birds are flying, the wind and smoke are clear and the characters are all in the snow. Qin Pingon came to Huangshi and Xiaonyang. Behind him, higher up, there was a girl in a mink hat and a handsome monk with an unfamiliar face, wearing a green robe, slowly walking down the Shinto steps. Quickly climbing the mountain and arriving next to Qin Pingon, Deng Jianping was obviously very nervous. Huangshi found it interesting. When talking to her sister and brother-in-law, Aren't you pretty young and witty? Now you are a mute and you are in trouble? Qin Pingon didn't say anything and Deng Jianping became more and more embarrassed. Huangshi saw that the atmosphere was awkward and couldn't turn his elbows out, so he joked, Qin Jianxian is too familiar with the elegant words of Luzhou, our northern capital. I can't hear the slightest trace of Aquarius Island elegant dialect or Old Dolly Mandarin accent. Qin Pingon smiled and said, Everyone is happy to meet you no matter where you are. But in the final analysis, I am not as honest as Brother Huang in treating others, so when I was paying the bill, I reciprocated and signed up for my number. The embroiderer hurriedly said, Qin Jianxian is right. Be careful when you go out. You should speak only a few words to people you meet and don't give up your whole heart to everyone casually. Deng Jianping nodded, deeply convinced. Huang Zai's face was full of melancholy. My good wife, you are so unkind, you are burning the bridge across the river. Am I the only one who is a confused outsider? Xiego and Qing Tong came here to get together, and Xianyang asked in a low voice, Qin Jianxian, who is this girl? Qin Pingon smiled and said, Master Deng just calls me by my name. Her name is Xiego and she is our Lulu Mountain genealogy monk. Of course we are definitely not father and daughter. Xiego rubbed his mink hat, grinned and introduced himself. My name is Xiego. Why don't I mention it by name? It's a false name for an external object. You can just call me Guzi from now on. I am the second in command of Luo Luoshan. The worshipper, like the mountain master and Deng Jianpain, is a sword cultivator, but I entered the mountain later. It seems that among the genealogy cultivators I am a little earlier than your brother. Although Huangshi was always regarded as a wandering wild cultivator in Luzhou Beiju, in fact he had a great background and origins. Otherwise he would not have suggested that his brother-in-law Deng Jianpain cross the continent to come to Wutong Mountain to practice Taoism. It was Huangshi who knew the true identity of the Qingyu patriarch, and his relationship with the demon-suppressing tower. Huangshi said from the bottom of his heart, Huangshi, a monk from Luzhou Beiju, and his Taoist companion Deng Jianxiao have met Senior Qing Tong. Our original intention is for Deng Jianpain to come here to find a seat in the ancestral hall. Qing Tong just nodded in greeting with a cold and distant expression and casually made a pun. The temple is small. The vegetarian food is bland, so it may not be delicious. Don't look at Qing Tong's lack of momentum on Xiaomo and Beijing's side. After all, he is a time-honored person with 10,000 years of experience in the Ascension realm. Not to mention he is the owner of one of the 9 Xiongxian towers in the world, and he is even more closely related to Lao Guan. The Lord has been a neighbor for countless years. In the eyes of Qing Tong, how could the Huangshi and Deng siblings be treated with such condescension? Xiego de Bao said, I worship my master and practice my sword well. If you encounter any problems in building the road, if the mountain master is not around, you can ask me. You can also often go to the sword worship platform on one of the mountains of the Luopa mountain domain. Find Gontang, just worship Gontang. When you get to Luolu mountain you will know his identity. Anyway, the little old man is also a sword cultivator with a fair level and his own Taoist power is average, but his ability to preach is not well. Patience is a rare advantage in him. Qin Pingon had a small accident. It was rare for Xiego to be so concerned about other people's cultivation. The old deaf boy had to suffer a lot in order to learn some sword skills from her. I remember that when we first arrived at Luopa Mountain, the old deaf boy was still reluctant in every possible way. He was afraid that the young hermit official would ask him to shoulder the burden, which would cause extra social affairs and delay his cultivation. It's good now. I heard that Gan Chongfeng has moved directly to Jiamao on Huaying Peak to teach Taoism. Instead, I started to worry that those Taoist embryos have no way to study and are not brave enough to break through the cultivation realm. Just because Deng Jianpain's visit to the mountains to learn Taoism made Xiego think of the earth on Earth thousands of years ago. Almost all the monsters who had opened up their spiritual intelligence and could shape their bodies had a pure and unyielding Taoist spirit. Heart, you want to learn from the masters of those who have attained the Tao. Many monsters have just heard the name of a certain mountain or a certain Taoist temple and know a general direction. They will make a wish and resolutely go there. The mountains and rivers are far away and the Tao lies there, so we have to work hard. This journey often takes several years or even decades. The journey is often extremely difficult and dangerous. And finally we have the opportunity to meet the Taoist priest who has been asking him to help solve my doubts. It is not only a hard work that consumes endless physical strength, but also a journey of mind. Even if you are lucky enough not to be expelled and be left on the mountain by the Qi refiner, the matter of cultivating Taoism has only just begun. Most of them will be anonymous for the time being. Whether it can be included in the door wall requires long-term observation. After that, the mountain will be protected for decades, or even it may take 100 years for a Taoist priest to teach you a few words of true secrets. So Xiego's first impression of swordsman Deng Jianpain was not bad, and he would choose his master. Choosing a master depends not only on vision but also on luck. This is a very true skill. We need to know how many demon monks who sincerely followed the Tao in ancient times met a miserable end. They tried their best to fetch water from a bamboo basket and became the Taoist food for some Qi refiners with ulterior motives. The embroiderer wiped the corners of her eyes, focused her voice into a thread and murmured softly, "Fortunately, all the hard work has come to an end. A rather bad beginning has a happy ending." In fact, everything that the woman does besides her brother, her own martial arts training, and all the matters on the mountaintop are handled extremely carefully. Only the matters related to Jianping are trivial, and it is easy to get lost and get entangled. It was extremely difficult, as if she had lost her soul, and she had to ask Huangxi for advice. Huangxi had no choice but to remind her in her heart. Xianyang, where are you now? I just became a master. Jianping still has a long way to go from now on. He only said that he would go to Luopa Mountain and practice sword practice with Chen Pingon. No more than practicing at home, there are many things that need to be paid attention to, such as how to get along with those fellow disciples who are already well established and famous. Can they be harmonious? Will they be excluded? Can Jianping adapt to it? Luo Mountain's family tradition, whether it is related to the elders or not, usually treats people less casually than in the dojo at home. We know each other well in the past, so naturally we don't have to worry about saying something wrong or inappropriate, and the other person may miss him for a long time. Besides, well, our side is just a hilltop with no more than 100 people in total. It is far inferior to the hidden dragons and crouching tigers in Lulu Mountain. There are many experts with different temperaments. Let's just talk about this girl Xia. She can serve as the second enshrinement of Lulu Mountain at the foot of the mountain. In the store, can we imagine her true identity? Things like this will all be considered and figured out by Jianping in the future. He needs to be able to accommodate others and adapt to the environment entirely on his own. The embroiderer felt sorry for herself and said, "It's still my fault. I didn't teach enough principles in the past. It's also my fault that you, the brother-in-law, are not close to my brother-in-law, so you can't have a few drinks throughout the year." Huang Zai's head grew red when he heard this. The number of times I have gone to drink with him has never been less, and I still have to face him. There was only one time when both parties drank well, but Deng Jianping was so drunk that he sat on the ground, and the brother-in-law had to squat on the ground to drink with him. The brat was so drunk that he still kept his momentum and said, "I dare to let you down. Sister, just chop me to death. Even if you can't chop me to death, I will die on the top of your mountain." It was the scene of a vigil during the Chinese New Year. Huangxi ended up carrying his brother-in-law on his back, and even had nectar from heaven spat on his head. When his brother-in-law got this job, Huangxi himself felt that he was sincere. The embroiderer whispered, "Husband, it's hard for you." Huangxi smiled and said, "Xianyang, if you want to make up for the past you don't have enough, just ask me to get it. If you feel you owe me, you can pay me back in the next life. I will be an uncle then. I will let you rub ink on your sleeves every day to add fragrance, and I will also serve you tea and water to help wash your feet. Haha, I feel happy just thinking about it." The embroiderer elbowed her again and then started to worry again, but Jianping went on a long trip alone with no one around to take care of him. Will he be wronged when he gets to Luopa Mountain? If a cultivator wants to gain something, he should go through a lot of hardships. Don't be anxious. In short, let's take it one step at a time. You have to believe in my vision of good and bad people, and you can also believe in Jianping's Taoism. Heart of. Huangxi then gave an attributive sentence. What's more, when Jianping went to that Luopa Mountain, what he really wanted to learn was not just Qin Pingan's swordsmanship. Xiago seemed to be afraid that the mountain master would regret it, so he said tentatively, "Sister Deng Jianxiao and brother-in-law Huangxi are both very good people, especially this one named Xianyang who is naive. I believe that the character of this child Jianping is not that different." Where to go? The owner of the mountain picked it up and missed it. Is this called buying a pig to watch a pen? Which pot does Qingtong not mention? Yinguan is able to recruit disciples here. Doesn't Wutong Mountain have some credit for naming it as a courtesy? Xiego grinned and muttered, "It's bad luck. I'll never come here again." Qingtong felt relieved. From now on it would be best if you, the Taoist couple, are not invited to come. Qin Pingon changed the subject and said with a smile, "Comrade Lao Qing, please make some space for us to sit down and chat for a few words. Then let Deng Jianping perform a simple apprenticeship ceremony and stop disturbing fellow Taoist Qingxiu." Qing Tong opened all the restrictions on the landscape and found a quiet place in the private dojo. In the room, the host Qing Tong and the host Qin Pingon sat on the same seat. Xiago sat cross-legged on the chair, opposite Deng Jianping and three others. Qin Pingon was sitting upright, and he only had to drink a bowl of apprenticeship tea from Deng Jianping to be registered as master and apprentice. After that, you still need to change to the Jisa Peak Ancestral Master Hall and go through the process of recording your name on the Golden and Jade genealogy. Qin Pingon looked soft and said slowly, Jianping, when we become masters later, we will have the status of masters and disciples on the mountain. As a preacher, my requirements for you do not say what realm you must reach in the future, so you don't have to feel pressure in this regard. I only have one thing to say. You must remember that after you follow me into the mountains to practice, you must sincerely follow the Tao and work hard to practice swordsmanship. In addition, if you feel that you are not good at dealing with people, you can live in seclusion in the mountains and concentrate on practicing swordsmanship. Occasionally leave the dojo and go out to relax, whether it is at the top of Zhufeng Mountain or in Huaihuang County. No matter who you meet on the road, no matter who the person is or what their identity is, just have a rough etiquette. As for your fellow brothers and sisters, there is no need to rush to meet them, and when they meet, there is no need to deliberately ponder their thoughts, treat people and things, just be yourself. Huang Shi glanced at Xiaonyang as if to say, look, Qin Jianxian has already thought of what you are worried about. Xiaonyang, who had been subconsciously clutching her dress, felt as if she had taken a reassurance. She just felt like she was in a dream. Jianping was relieved of her knot and recognized her master. Xiego immediately helped. These are not polite words, they are the sincerity of our mountain master. For example, there is a Tao Jianxian in the Qingping sword sect who is in the Jindan realm. He is in the same realm as Jianping. He was born in Shanzi Yeshio and he has a bad temper and loves to scold people. Jiang Shangzhen, Miyu, Mai Xiaomao, and even the owner of the mountain were all taught a few words by him in person. Tao Jianxian is still alive and kicking every day now. He. Now that we are all family members, then I will tell you more about Tao Jiangxian's feats. Last time Qingping sword sect held the opening ceremony of the mountain, Tao Jianxian was the last one to get up and met our mountain master on the mountain road. He spoke straightforwardly and persuaded that there should be less red tape for this kind of ceremony, otherwise he would take a nap in the ancestral hall and sleep in his cage. The mountain master had no choice but to nod obediently and say okay. Qin Pingon smiled and explained, the story of what happened has been polished by Xiego, and it is a bit exaggerated. Tao Wen doesn't just curse people when there is nothing wrong. Most of them happen for a reason. The embroiderer was stunned when she heard that. That Jindan realm sword cultivator couldn't be so bold, right? How cruel must he be to be so generous? How many lives do you have to dare to curse like this? Huang Shi laughed from the bottom of her heart and said, Xiaonyang, I can see that Xie Zishi has a good impression of you. Maybe this is called eye compatibility. The woman then thought, even if Xie Zishi used an exaggeration, but no matter how ignorant we Jianping is, how can we always be better people than that Tao Jianxian? Qing Tong coughed and reminded that this was Yin Guan recruiting disciples. In a sense, every word he said was preaching and teaching skills. You Bai Jing, an outsider, should not interrupt, it is inappropriate. Xiego rolls his eyes, bad luck is really bad luck. Little did he know that Qing Tong felt that meeting the two of them would seem to be a conflict of fate, which would be his downfall. Qin Pingon said sternly, Deng Jianping, before you formally become a master, as far as I am concerned, it is not only the master who chooses his apprentice, but the apprentice can also choose his master. The rule that one day is a master and a lifetime is a father is not so natural. If one day you feel that the two ways are not compatible, you can just get together and break up. Don't be too rigid about the master-disciple status, and don't think too much about the human world outside of practicing Taoism and practicing swordsmanship. Of course, you still have to go through the necessary ancestral hall procedures. Yes, remember not to leave without saying hello. In fact, both the master and the apprentice were of the same age, but no one here thought that Qin Pingon was putting on airs, and Deng Jianping was always holding his breath and listening with an open mind. Until this moment, Deng Jianping's mind was still full of confusion. Hearing these words, he suddenly became frightened and said in a trembling voice, unless Qin Jianxian and Luo Luoshan insist on driving me away, I will never leave the genealogy and retreat. He said, even if you drive me away, I will still take my bedding and stay at the foot of the mountain, waiting for Qin Jianxian to change his mind. Qin Pingon smiled and said nothing. Xiego was overjoyed. This guy knows how to take advantage and knows how to find a way out at the foot of the mountain. The gatekeeper of our Lulu mountain is Taoist priest Xianwei. Qing Tong felt sorry for this young swordsman. Until now he still looked at Qin Jianxian with a sense of distance. Qin Pingon said, before I hand you the apprenticeship to Jianping, please go and wait outside the door. I have something to say to your sister and brother-in-law. Deng Jianping quickly stood up, walked to the door, closed the door gently and stood in the corridor as if facing the wall, pursed his lips. After a long time he came back to his senses and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Xiago raised his chin and signaled to Qing Tong that you are an outsider and you should leave the house quickly. Qing Tong, a landowner, had no choice but to stand up and make room for a group of outsiders. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. Friends Qing Tong don't need to avoid suspicion. You are a registered worshipper of Qingping sword sect. At this moment, everyone in the house counts as one of your own." As expected, Qing Tong sat down again and shook his sleeves coolly. Xiago stared at this guy. Xiaomi Li said, "The martial arts master in the book who has an internal strength of 1 or 2 juzi has excellent martial arts, and I heard that he can kill people with his eyes." Qing Tong was actually depressed in his heart. He was annoyed to death by this young girl in a mink hat who was now known as Xiago. She might as well have met Bai Jing, the swordsman from 10,000 years ago. Qin Pingon said, "Fellow Daoist Huang Master Deng, first of all, I have to thank you for trusting me to give Jian Ping to me to teach you swordsmanship. Then I also ask you to rest assured that I will be extremely careful in my teachings in the future, both emotionally and rationally." Jian Ping now he is in the Golden Core realm. With his qualifications and foundation, it is not difficult to break through the bottleneck and enter the Yuanying realm within a few seconds. As expected, his real difficulty lies in the fact that when he was in retreat in the Yuanying realm and tried to break through, he had 2 inner demons. One of them, when it was an accompanying city in Qin Pingon at that time, I had my own means to prepare for a rainy day and help him pass the level without taking shortcuts. However, the inner demons of the previous level must be solved by the person who tied the bell. Before Grandmaster Deng says goodbye to Jian Ping, he needs to have a frank heart-to-heart talk with his brother and sister. Remember, Grandmaster Deng should not care about Deng Jianping's feelings, and should not blindly listen to Deng Jianping's thoughts. He should cover his ears with lightning speed. Once it is clear what Deng Jianxia was thinking and why he acted as he did in the difficult situation that year. It should be noted that Deng Jianping was unable to resolve this knot, which was calamity. When faced with calamity, he ran away again and again, and his Taoist heart retreated. Even if the flood breaks the embankment, Deng Jianping's achievements in this life will not only stop at the nascent soul realm, but he will sail against the current and retreat again. Therefore, Grandmaster Deng must solve the hidden dangers in this matter first. Otherwise he will not be able to succeed later. The more I preach, the more mistakes I make regarding Deng Jianping's future. Deng Jianxiao said in a deep voice, "I will definitely live up to my trust. I will go outside and have a heart-to-heart talk with Jian Ping." Huang Shi hesitated to speak. Qin Pingon said bluntly, "Deng Jianxiao, have you really thought about it? Do you recognize yourself and dare to tell others who you are? What's the point?" Deng Jianxiao was stunned. Huang Shi nodded slightly, and the authorities were confused, and it was clear to the onlookers. Qin Pingon continued to ask, "When suffering comes, dare to be angry and speak out. Rise up and kill when necessary. Is it for yourself or for your relatives? If the Tao is to have both, what is the order and emphasis?" Deng Jianxiao at that time, it was inappropriate to abandon the Immortals and turn to learn boxing. I couldn't help myself. Today, who do I live for in this life, and who should I live for? From now on, Deng Jianping should face Deng Jianping. What is the responsibility of this name and how is it responsible? Deng Jianxiao couldn't answer a single question. Huang Shi said cautiously, "Qin Jianxian, there are a lot of questions. Could you please ask the embroiderer to calm down a little?" Qin Pingon just glanced at him. Huang Shi became speechless. What a guy, he is so powerful. Qin Pingon, who had a similar conversation at the wine table, was completely different from the other two. Qin Pingon was silent for a moment, asking and answering a question to himself. As a monk, his will is depressed and his heart is like ashes. Can the ashes be rekindled? If you stir up the embers of the brazier, there is a hidden pearl. Huang Shi secretly praised. Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Master Deng, go call Jian Ping in." Deng Jianxiao had been in a daze and suddenly woke up, stood up and went out with Huang Shi. Qing Tong was the first to leave his seat and stand up. Xiago did this on purpose, slowing down and leaving the chair. He could no longer speak and act exactly like Qing Tong. What does it mean to practice Taoism in the mountains? It is a secret heart-to-heart teaching between master and disciple, and the Dharma is not transmitted to the 6 ears. Deng Jianping didn't sit down, he just stood. Qin Pingon didn't say anything about this and said, "Jian Ping, I can allow you to practice sword breaking slowly, and I can even accept my own direct disciples who often slack off in practicing sword, wasting time and wasting their qualities. There is no big deal. To succeed, you must be a good person with a clear conscience from beginning to end. The disciple's failure in practicing Taoism is because, after all, the master who is a preacher, failed to teach the disciple well. These are easy to discuss, and you can be allowed to be on the road of life. Make mistakes, admit them, and correct them. But I will never allow Deng Jianping to disappoint his sister who has no requirements for him. One day I will not only clean up the family in person, but also let you know what it means to regret having me, Qin Pingon, as your teacher. Did you hear me? Deng Jianping shook his head and said in a deep voice, Qin Jianxian, I remember every word. Qin Pingon smiled. Huh. Deng Jianping suddenly realized it and scratched his head. Master, all the disciples have remembered it. Qin Pingon seemed to have profound meaning in his words. A true heart-to-heart comparison will not drag down both parties. Deng Jianping seems to have some enlightenment. In the corridor outside the house, Qing Tongxian symbolically used a layer of formation to help isolate the world inside the house. He glanced at the Taoist couple from other continents and asked straight to the point, Deng Jianxiao, with the cultivation levels of you and the Taoist couple, why do you let your younger brother come to Wutong Mountain to join a Jade Pu realm family? The embroiderer was hesitant. After all, it involved her man's family secrets. Huangshi was very honest and said with a smile, to be honest, the founder of my family once traveled all over the world to visit real people. Before the war was over, he left a notebook recording his experiences. He wrote that he was with Qing Tong at the Yao Tower in Tonggishao town. The senior had a chance encounter. At that time he stopped to rest at the entrance of a grotto sealed with white clouds. He was struck by the scene and chatted a few words about his Taoist experience. Unfortunately, the conversation with the master in the mountain did not agree, so the ancestor took his leave and left. Qing Tong thought for a while and finally remembered that thousands of years ago he had indeed seen a sloppy and lame old Taoist priest with profound Taoist power and strong agility. But for the young Qing Tong, this kind of encounter is like a leaf of duckweed spinning on the water, fleeting and never paying much attention to it. So Qing Tong just said with emotion, it's not easy for your family to inherit the incense tradition for so many years. If you keep up your efforts, don't insult the ancestor. There is an old saying in the mountains, it is better to mess with the new sects that are booming than the old mountains with endless orthodoxy. Because I don't know if there are several ancestors hiding in the latter mountain or in the hanging statues. Huangshi called the Taoist priest and said respectfully, the younger generation should bear in mind the ancestral precepts and teachings of the elders. Seeing that the atmosphere was good, Huangshi said, my ancestor Zhang Fu also wrote down a sentence in his notes, saying that in Tonggishao back then, there were only two strange people who dared to say that they had realized Taoism. They were in Donghaiguan Taoist temple in one continent, under the central plane tree. Qing Tong seemed to be smiling but said, such biased words can only be written in a notebook and closed for self-admiration. As for the children in future generations who are qualified to read this notebook, too much words will inevitably lead to mistakes, so don't spread it outside. If this kind of talk is accidentally heard by the old viewer, the person who said it and the person who listened will definitely be unable to eat and walk around, and neither of us can even think of running away. Fellow Daoist Huang, please don't harm me. Qing Tong added another sentence. It's a big honor for Mr. Huang Daoyu to be able to ask Mr. Yin Guan to pay for a drink. Huangshi smiled heartily and said, that's because Qin Jianxian is approachable and has nothing to do with my reputation. This trip to Wutong Mountain was not in vain. I also got an extra Taoist friend from Senior Qing Tong. Isn't it the same treatment as my ancestor? When I went back to the family ancestral hall to offer incense to the hanging portrait, I had to say said. Qing Tong exclaimed, why don't fellow Daoist Huang go to Luopa Mountain to be a guest? Huangshi wondered, why? Xiego chuckled and said, he has sharp edges and corners and speaks straightforwardly. Huangshi asked, am I really capable? Isn't Luopa Mountain closed and still accepting guests? Xiego said, whether we can seal the mountain, whether we can accept guests, is not a matter of our mountain master's word? Huangshi exclaimed, with one heart and one mind, Qin Jianxian is very prestigious. It's not that Huangshi deliberately said something nice, but Huangshi knows very well that people in a big family or sect have complicated hearts, with their own misunderstandings and grievances growing like overgrown weeds. On the other side of the room, Qin Pingon said, everyone can come in. Xiego quickly made up for it. Luluo Mountain is not a one-word palace. After entering the room, Qin Pingon sat down and took the apprenticeship tea from Deng Jianpain. Deng Jianpain refused to listen and insisted on kneeling and kowtow. After Qin Pingon drank the tea, he became the master and apprentice. Xiego was counting his fingers, silently counting how many disciples the mountain master had now. Deng Jianxiao raised the back of his hand to wipe away his tears. The woman had never been so happy. Qin Pingon put down his teacup and said with a smile, Deng Jianpain will return to Aquarius continent with me. Grandmaster Deng, what do you think, fellow Daoist Huang? Are we going to Luopa Mountain to sit together? Deng Jianxiao frowned and said, Qin Jianxian, don't call me Grandmaster Deng. Just call me Xianyang. She almost forgot that Qin Pingon was a genuine kung fu martial artist. Not long ago they had a fist fight with Pushun Huang Yiyun, and they had become quite attached to each other in private. Yiyun bluntly said that she was able to stay at the level of kung fu, thanks to Qin Pingan's boxing lesson. Yiyun was teaching boxing rather than asking about boxing, and Deng Jianxiao knew the importance of it. Huang, she said, we originally planned to send Jianpain to Wutong Mountain, and then continue downstream to Latongjiezhu, all the way to Kashandu on the seaside, and then take a cross-continental ferry to Nampaswazi to meet a few current friends with whom we have family connections. Dojo. Qin Pingon nodded. Then you can follow the planned itinerary. Anyway, Luluo Mountain is not long and we are waiting for you two to visit us at any time. Of course Xianyang wanted to accompany Jianping for a longer distance, and it would be best to send her brother to Luo Mountain. But for such a big matter she still listened to Huang Shi. Huang Shi is indeed better at getting along with the immortal masters and sects on the mountain. Qin Pingon said, then let me talk to fellow Taoist Qing Tong about some personal matters first. You have to say goodbye for now, but you can also chat for a few more words. In half an hour we will meet at the foot of the mountain. Huang Shi was fine. Just when Deng Jianpain was alone with Qin Pingon in the house, Senior Qing Tong had already told them a place suitable for siblings to talk. It was a small pavilion on the cliff that was best for enjoying the scenery. The pavilion had clouds on its forehead. Pass. After Huang Shi and the others left, Qin Pingon handed over a piece of paper. Qing Tong took the piece of paper covered with small regular script and asked doubtfully, really? Qin Pingon glared. How can it be difficult for me to be stopped by such trivial matters? Talent is flowing like a spring and am afraid of it myself. Who can stop it? Xiego laughed heartily. Once she was in a good mood, she didn't care whether Qing Tong pretended to be in the 14th realm or not. Qin Pingon laughed at himself. I even had the idea of accepting a disciple as my master. I almost said it on the steps of the mountain road earlier. Xiego was really shocked now and Qing Tong was even more surprised. On the mountain road to the small pavilion, Deng Jianpain took the lead and said with a smile, Master talked to me a lot, and also taught me a truth that I will keep in mind. Huang Shi joked, what's the golden truth? Can I take advantage of it and listen to it? The embroiderer elbowed again, and this time Huang Shi, who was very familiar with it, blocked it with her palm. The embroiderer elbowed her again. Hey, I'll block it again, so skillfully that Deng Jianpain, who was his brother-in-law, felt distressed. Deng Jianpain said, the truth is very simple, just one sentence, human life is rare and a gentleman will not save it. Huang Shi nodded and agreed. This kid Jianping really likes to get into trouble. Qin Jianxian is advising you to cherish your life and don't die casually? Deng Jianpain was non-committal. In fact, Master also said a few words at the end. It is the principles that your Master Qi taught me back then and I will pass them on to you today. It just so happens that I haven't left the town yet and you haven't gone to the town yet. You haven't gone up the mountain yet and you're still outside the mountain. Xianyang asked tentatively, Jianping, I'm going to tell you something from my heart, do you want to listen? Deng Jianpain took a deep breath, looked determined, nodded and said, Sister, I've been waiting for this sentence for a long time. Huang Shi smiled and said, Hey, the implication is that you are complaining about my sister for not taking the initiative to chat with you? It's so wonderful to turn an army against you with one hand. Deng Jianpain's face turned red. He was not good at talking and was holding back too much. Xianyang's elbow was quite powerful, but Deng Jianqing grabbed her arm and walked forward quickly together. Huang Shi held the back of his head with both hands, slowed down, walked behind his siblings, looked around, saw the wind and earth were beautiful, then looked up at the sky. Wow, what a good weather. He did not enter the pavilion but squatted on the edge of the cliff from a distance, occasionally glancing at the pavilion secretly from the corner of his eye. I don't know what the siblings were talking about, but I saw that Xianxia finally cried for the first time. The grievance was on her face but not in her heart. She lowered his gaze and saw someone on the other side of the mountain road, wearing a green shirt and long coat, holding a hiking pole. Reminds me of a saying that above all the martial arts in the world, Cao Cao dressed in white is dressed in green. She smiled knowingly and went to visit Xianxia when he had the opportunity. How strong must this guy be to make Qin Pingon lose several boxing matches in a row without winning? Qin Pingon took Xiago down the mountain first. No matter how arrogant Ting Tong is, it is only polite to send him to the mountain gate. On the way down the mountain I met several groups of monster monks who were going up the mountain. Halfway up the mountain, the goddess of the Wutong Mountain Ceremony Department was responsible for entertaining the guests, and the monks from the patrol and hunting department were responsible for driving them away. Seeing the mature and prudent old man, Qin Pingon took the initiative to clasp his fists, and the latter clasped his fists in return. After both parties nodded, they smiled and left. Needless to say, in life, east, west, north and south go their separate ways. Qing Tong remembered this scene in his heart. And there was that foxy girl who was surrounded by the stars. When she saw the guest in green shirt, she smiled brightly and extended her hand to say hello. Brother June, we meet again. We are quite destined, right? But she muttered a little bit. For some reason, there was an indistinguishable male and female monk in green clothes next to the girl in the mink hat. He was really a beauty. Qin Ping's arrangement turned a deaf ear. The female cultivator became more and more enthusiastic as she talked. This is Lishan. Why, you didn't pass the test at the Wutong Mountain Ceremony Department or you just got rejected. Do you want me to give you a favor? Qin Pingon smiled and asked. The person next to me is the Patriarch Qingyu of Wutong Mountain. When I go down the mountain he sees off the guest. Who do you think needs help and who intercedes? The female cultivator and her companions burst into laughter. She even covered her heart, her eyes were as charming as silk and she said sweetly, Brother June is good-looking and his words are even more interesting. Do you want to be friends with my sister? Qin Pingon laughed it off. Qing Tong remained silent and kept walking. He just turned his head and glanced at the group of who had defected to him. Xiego gloated and said, Yellow mud is stuck to my crotch. Qing Tong's face turned darker when he heard this. Qin Pingon held a hiking stick in his hand. He poked the ground lightly with the bamboo stick, making a loud sound, and said in his heart, It is good to let the local demon clan in Tonggishao have a place to live. If Wutong Mountain can change the customs, it will be even more green. Fellow Taoist friends have a lot of merit. Qing Tong nodded. Do your best. Qin Pingon said, It's not just about trying your best, you must do it well. You have to have this intention first. Qing Tong said, Be taught. Qin Pingon smiled and said, When you first establish a sect there will definitely be a lot of things and a mess. Everything is difficult at the beginning, so don't be discouraged. I believe you will find the trick soon. If you have any questions, please send more letters to Qingping. Jianzhong and Dafu Academy are the ones, and I have a personal relationship with Wen Yu, the deputy headmaster of Tianmu Academy. I will write a letter and ask him to help you keep an eye on it. Don't worry, there will always be a bright future in another village. Qing Tong hummed. On a whim he said that he wanted to establish a sect, but he really had the sign of Wutong Mountain. A large number of demon monks were pouring into the land every day and Qing Tong was really beating his heart. When they arrived at the mountain gate, they waited patiently for Deng Jianping and the others to meet here. Qin Pingon looked up at the memorial arch list book and said with a smile, Is it written by Mr. Qing Shan? It seems that his skill is not as good as that of my old cook who has more gold and stone spirit. Qing Tong smiled and said, I'll make do with it. Xiego clicked his tongue, he couldn't speak so he didn't talk much to that old Jia. Qin Pingon said, Go back first so don't wait with us. Qing Tong turned around and went up the mountain. Deng Jianping went down the mountain alone and came to Qin Pingon and Xiego. He smiled and said, Master Xianxia, my sister and brother-in-law will spend more time in the mountains. Qin Pingon nodded, handed the green bamboo stick in his hand to Deng Jianping and said with a smile, Handmade bamboo stick, an ordinary object, don't dislike it. Deng Jianping was stunned and took the hiking pole with both hands. Several groups of monster monks who were drinking in the shop at the foot of the mountain were still queuing up to record their files. I heard that the goddess in charge of the ceremony department was a nascent soul realm water goddess from the old dynasty, and the one who was the patrolling department, the top spot, was actually a martial artist at the top of the far-traveling realm. But including the two of them, everyone who had already arrived at Wutong Mountain with official hats looked respectful, waiting for the handsome monk wearing a green robe. Qing Tong's face was indifferent and he continued to climb the mountain without stopping. He just said, "Keep busy with your work." The charming female cultivator and the others were stunned on the spot as if struck by lightning. I begged and begged a lot, just asking that this person be the famous Jade Patriarch, but the problem is that he seems to be it. Absolutely true. Qing Tong hesitated for a moment, then turned around and pointed at a certain old man, and told the ceremony department to record his name directly in the genealogy without reviewing his resume. The old man, who was inexplicably destined to be promoted by the Department of Rites and Ceremonies, was in a daze for a moment. After the Patriarch Qingyu, who had opened the golden mouth, left, instead of saying thank you to the founder, he suddenly ran out for a distance and headed towards the foot of the mountain. Looking up into the distance, it's a pity that the green shirt that the old man only thought was ordinary was no longer visible. Just because the old man was extremely sharp-eyed and attentive, he remembered that Patriarch Qingyu sent guests down the mountain. As the host and the head of a sect, he was not walking in the middle but on the left and right with the girl in the mink hat. Who is it? Can't be him, right? How can it be? A little girl noticed something strange, ran over, tugged on the old man's sleeve and asked softly, "Grandpa, what's wrong?" The old man smiled and said, "It's nothing. I must have made a mistake." The little girl smiled coquettishly. "Where did it go?" The old man said in his heart, "It got stuck on a name." The little girl looked puzzled. "Which name?" The old man rubbed the child's head, fearing that he would scare the child if he said it, and said softly, "It's just a name with many identities." On the road outside the mountain, the disciple asked, "Master, I'm still curious about that truth. Can you explain it to me?" The master replied, "There may be people like Lu Xianyang and Qin Pingon in the city." Deng Jianping tightened his grip on the green bamboo stick and nodded vigorously. "There must be some. There are some in Suijia City and there will be some elsewhere." Xiego whispered, "Mountain Master, I can't help myself in this scene, so I just want to write a limerick." Qin Pingon said, "Stop, please thank the second seat and put away this magical power." Xiego muttered, "I can't stop it. Besides, I only want to come up with half of it." Qin Pingon said helplessly, Okay, whatever you want." "Thanks to the dog, ha," he said, show your ugliness," with a proud face, and shouted at the top of his lungs. Landscapes change everywhere and travelers are unaware of them. Qin Pingon let out a sigh and said it was not bad. Xiego couldn't stand the praise and turned his nostrils to the sky. Deng Jianping became more and more relaxed. The master of the mountain and the second minister had a really harmonious relationship. After walking to a secluded place in the mountains, Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Then let's drive on with our swords and catch up, Jianping. I'll teach you the 18 stops of sword qi on the way." "Thank you, dog, for rubbing your hands." Deng Jianping was worried. 3 sword lights suddenly rose from the ground. The first figure was the same color as the blue sky, and the picturesque mountains and rivers of the earth were beneath his feet. "The road is like the blue sky. You all ask me my name. I am the landscape master of Qingdu, and I am Qin Pingon, the mighty swordsman." Sword of Coming Chapter 1134. At dusk there were large fire clouds and there was a river on the earth, winding like a golden snake. The 3 sword lights dragged out long flowing fireflies, and wherever they went, there was a thunderous roar in the sea of clouds. Deng Jianping learned the luck method of the 18 stops of sword qi, neither quickly nor slowly. Not fast compared to the outstanding swordsman geniuses at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, but not slow, probably because Qin Pingon was at the bottom. Qin Pingon did not treat Xiego as an outsider. She was a typical person who could master it as soon as she heard it. She quickly practiced it several times, and her sword energy was running without any stagnation. In terms of sword training qualifications, Ning Yao and Xiego are indeed the only ones among geniuses. After Xiego learned this skill, he praised the foundation of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. This put pressure on Deng Jianping, who thought he had not yet truly mastered the technique, and asked Qin Pingon in his heart if his qualifications were not good enough. Qin Pingon was speechless for a moment. "Who do you want to compare your qualifications with? But you want to compare with Xietzishi?" On the way to ride the wind, Xiego was a little envious of the green bamboo stick. Mountain Master, can you also give me a hiking stick? We are all people who write landscape travel notes every day. Qin Pingon declined politely. No need, you are not a nosy person. Xiego did not give up and vowed, I can take more care of him in the future. Qin Pingon said bluntly, is there a possibility that it would be better to ignore the noisy things you encounter? Xiego was a little depressed, humming haha, and extended his fists, making countless holes or straight lines in the sea of clouds. Qin Pingon smiled and said, if you are really greedy, whenever you go out alone and feel that you have taken care of one or two other things, you can ask me for help when you come back to the mountain. However, Qin Pingon didn't think Xiego would be interested in this thing. After all, there are never fewer people, things that I miss today and forget when I wake up tomorrow. Qin Pingon turned to Deng Jianping and said, we will take a short rest at Qingjing Mountain, and then we will continue on our way. We will neither cross the sea with a sword nor take a ferry. I will teach you an ancient secret 3-mountain talisman that can instantly shrunk to the limitless land, travel across continents. Your current realm is the golden elixir, which may be a bit difficult, but with me and Xiego by your side the problem won't be too big. When you land at Nanue of Aquarius continent, your soul will be stirred just right. It can also examine the subtleties of your soul and the Yang and Yin gods to see if there are any gaps that need to be checked and filled. After teaching the talisman and the know-how, Qin Pingon carefully explained to Deng Jianping the rules and taboos on the use of the 3-mountain talisman. Finally, he told him that the Jianqi Shiba stop and the 3-mountain talisman are both secrets of Luoluo Mountain and should not be disclosed to others easily. Give way. Deng Jianping naturally kept it in mind. It seems that before going to the mountain, I only feel that the mountains are majestic. After entering the mountain, I realize that there are gods on the top of the mountain. Xiego said from the bottom of his heart, the mountain master really missed it. Deng Jianping's qualifications are average, but he is very similar to the ancient Taoist priest. He has a tenacious heart for the Tao and a pure heart for attaining the Tao. As long as he gets enlightened one day, he will be able to practice swordsmanship quickly. Qin Pingon smiled and said, then you can give me some more advice in the future. Anyway, I want to kidnap Chai Wu to be my successor. If I have the chance, let Jianping listen. If I teach 2 people the same content, I will make a profit. Xiego knew that his mountain master was embarrassed by his direct descendant, and he laughed and said, the mountain master can't teach a genius, and I can't teach someone who is not a genius. They complement each other. What a down-and-out mountain cow. Qin Pingon laughed and said, I've seen flatterers before, but I've never seen you flatter me with such a tricky angle. Although Deng Jianping couldn't hear their heartfelt exchanges, he noticed their subtle expressions from the corner of his eye. He guessed that Master and Xianxia were talking about something big. Deng Jianping sighed again. The atmosphere in Lulu Mountain is so good. Xiego asked for no reason, Mountain Master, you are still so young and you already have Zhou Xian as a close disciple of boxing. Isn't Deng Jianping the last direct disciple you will receive in Kendo? Qin Pingon shook his head and said, now there are 7 direct disciples. Let's try to have more than 10 direct disciples one day. No matter how many there is no need. Tui Dongshan, Pei Qian, Chao Qinglang, Zhao Xuxiao, Guizhujiao, Ningji, Deng Jianping. Among the 7 students and disciples, only Pei Qian and Zhao Xuxiao were actually learning boxing from Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon thought of something and felt that he must remind Deng Jianping, you have a junior brother named Tui Dongshan, who is the first master of Qingping sword sect. In the future, if he wants to protect you for a long time or something like that, I want to have a heart-to-heart talk with you about life aspirations, etc. Just ignore him and just move out of master. You can also complain to senior sister Pei and senior brother Chao. Although Deng Jianping didn't know what was going on, he still agreed honestly. During this period, Qin Pingon received a letter from Feijian. Xiego probed his head and glanced at the contents. It was a secret letter from his good neighbor Yeo Shinjun, asking Qin Pingon to give an exact date as soon as possible. Xiego felt a wave of resentment at the end of the letter. It turned out to be Wei Yeo who reminded him not to delay any longer. If you really want to be determined, it doesn't matter if you delay. Please tell Shanjuchen to tell His Majesty the Emperor clearly, don't let him Wei Bo be the unlucky person. In short, as long as Qin Pingon has set a date, the Dali Imperial Court will immediately start arranging the specific itinerary. The position of national advisor that has been vacant for many years and the old chair in the imperial study room in the capital will be confirmed. New owner. Qin Pingon silently put the secret letter into his sleeve, and Xiago asked tentatively, "The mountain master didn't reply to the letter on the spot? It's okay to just write a few perfunctory sentences. It's not easy for Wei Yao to blame. Mr. Zhu has said something fair. Wei Xinyu is like a long-term laborer for our Luopa mountain. The key is that the landlord never pays him any wages." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "We can finalize the date as soon as we return to Fiolu Dojo. We are all the people who traveled to the Lord of the Night, so what's the rush? It must be before the 5th day of May, no matter how late it is, it will never be later than this day." Xiago suddenly realized that it was as if the mountain owner had tried his best to persuade Wei Bo and the Zhongtu Confucian Temple to register the night tour god's number, but the result was? Qin Pingon said, "You know the Dali Imperial Court has made a request. They hope that I can show some pomp and circumstance and bring a few people who can fight. But now I am hesitant to bring Jian Ping with them." Xiago frowned slightly and tilted his head habitually. What does it mean? Qin Pingon couldn't laugh or cry when he saw this expression. In fact, this was the signature move of the kid in green on Lulu Mountain. Julien's evaluation is spot on. The silly son of a landlord's family has a kind of crystal-clear ignorance in his eyes. Qin Pingon explained, "What happened in the past is Lao Huangli and what will happen in the future is the most important thing. Pei Qian Ning Ji Chai Wu and Jian Ping are the future of Luo Luo Mountain." Xiago did enter the mountain late, so he missed the last visit to Mount Lulu to visit Jingyang Mountain. He couldn't miss it this time. Xiaomi Li often talked about this in the mountains and was very proud, saying that she was going to the top of such and such a mountain. His arms crossed his chest, his face full of seriousness. He felt that he was at least a foot tall at that time. In Luoluo Mountain, Xiago will not only wander around with the white-haired boy. No matter whether it is a sudden rain, the new moon is like a frost, or the moon is like frost, and the new moon is like a hook. He only knows the girl in the mink hat who does not know what home is. He also likes to chat with the little girl in black, listen to the unscripted bragging of the kid in green, and go shopping in the mountainous market with the girl in pink skirt. Landing at the edge of Qingjing Mountain, Qin Pingon slowed down and walked towards the main mountain where Qinghu Palace is located, allowing Deng Jianping to regain his composure. Qin Pingon was an old acquaintance at Qinghu Palace, and soon a Taoist priest from the lower court went to the main mountain palace to watch and report. In the entire Qingjing mountain area, foreign Taoists are allowed to build grass and qingqing on the peaks. They only need to prepare some local products during the holidays and talk to the Qinghu Palace. In his early years before the Taoist priest from Qinghu Palace moved to Aquarius Continent, he was not so easy to talk to. After moving back to Qingjing Mountain, many measures became grand. Taoism has always placed more emphasis on nourishing the body than the mind. On the way to the mountains, it is common to see Taoist priests doing qi nurturing kung fu to strengthen the body. The movements may seem slow, but they are completed in one go. Onlookers, whether they are practicing martial arts or practicing qi, will find it pleasing to the eye. Deng Jianping hesitated to speak. Xiago couldn't stand this. The elders were so unhappy, so she wanted to make some remarks. Qin Pingon guessed Deng Jianping's thoughts and asked with a smile, "Do you want to ask about Chao Ci?" Deng Jianping looked embarrassed, but nodded honestly and admitted the matter. Xiago gave a thumbs up and praised, "A heroic man, a real hero. He just became a disciple and asked his master about someone who had lost several games in a row. Why do you want to help the master avenge you? Big ambition." Deng Jianping became more and more ashamed. Qin Pingon thought for a while and said, "We don't need to know Chao Ci, meet and talk to him, let alone ask about boxing. We all know that he must be a proud man." Deng Jianping nodded. A pure martial artist, one after another, his deeds are completely equivalent to those of immortality. Outsiders can imagine Chao Ci's demeanor. Qin Pingon added, "After you get to know Chao Ci really well, you will be surprised how he can be so arrogant and calm." Deng Jianping was surprised. Master actually respected Chao Ci, a peer of his age, so much? Remember in my hometown in the north over in Juluzhou, the martial arts fighters would not accept defeat even if they were defeated. Even if they were convinced, they would not be convinced verbally. The common sense of the martial artist Chao Ci, the open-mindedness of the sword cultivator Chou Miao, the gentle pragmatism of the Confucian scholar, etc. Qin Pingon would sincerely admire them, and of course the land wine fairy Lu Jinglong. Xiego patted his heart gently. Mountain master, in this way Xianxia is very similar to me. He doesn't show off his appearance when he goes out and is approachable. Deng Jianping was in a strange mood and plucked up the courage to ask, Master and Xianxia are both enemies and friends on the road to martial arts? Qin Pingon was silent for a long time. Regarding this matter, he confided his feelings for the first time and said slowly, I want to win him, but I am afraid he will lose. Deng Jianping couldn't understand Qin Pingan's thoughts for a while. Xiego helped the mink hat and explained on his behalf, I really want to win. I am a martial arts student. Who doesn't want to be the first and who is willing to be second? If you don't want to win, I'm afraid that the highest point of martial arts is already under my feet, and that's the end of it. If I am strong, there are still stronger people in the higher places in front of me, and this avenue has not yet reached the top, and I can continue to walk on it. I don't really like learning boxing, I can't say that. Deng Jianping was not stupid after all. He quickly noticed a bit of linguistic problem, and asked, I am number 1, can't I continue to reach higher levels of martial arts? Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. Xiego sighed, so you are not a martial artist. You practice Taoism on your own and seek martial arts from outside. A world without old enemies and bitter opponents is boring. You have become an adult bullying a bunch of children. Qin Pingon said frankly, in the final analysis, I still don't have the confidence to win against Xianxia. Xiego turned sideways and walked away. He raised his hands like Xiaomi Li and raised his thumbs towards his mountain master. Massive. Qin Pingon smiled and said, don't be too jealous when drinking. Xiego laughed heartily. Wuxia was a bit amused. He often said that Chai Wu's aptitude was as good as his ability to drink, which made Chai Wu reach the Yupu realm in one step, but he was more confused than anyone else. I heard that Master Qin of Luopa Mountain had come to visit again. The Taoist priests in Qinghu Palace suddenly felt complicated. The master of the palace did not seem to have started refining elixirs recently. The master of the temple, Lu Yong, was fishing beside the old dragon pond with a Taoist boy who was his disciple. Zhao Zhu, a disciple named Xianxia, came here to report the news. Zhao Zhu is the proud disciple that Lao Zhenren has high hopes for, and the little Taoist boy is Zhao Zhu's most valued personal disciple. The child was personally brought up the mountain during his travels a few years ago. He is kind-hearted and innocent. He has been practicing Taoism in the mountain for only 5 years. Lu Yong often taught Taoism in person, saying that the child was very patient and suitable for alchemy. The little Taoist boy had a simple mind. The Taoist priests in the temple all said that the master had an irresistible relationship with the young hermit official. Since the master was the guest of Luopa Mountain, he naturally felt close to Qin Jianxian. Being held by his master, the child raised his head and asked seriously, Master, do we still have the elixirs in stock in the temple? Don't let Master Qin go back empty-handed. Lu Yong looked embarrassed and gave a rough explanation. There are many rules in alchemy, and it must pay attention to the right time, place and people. If any of them are missing, a clever woman will be in a difficult situation. Zhao Zhu gently patted the child's bun and hesitated to speak. The old man twisted his beard and pondered for a moment, then smiled and said, the child happens to be with Pin Dao at this moment, and Yin Guan happens to go up the mountain at this time. It is the fate of this child. You and I don't have to be pretentious. Zhao Zhu nodded when he heard this, and the haze between his brows faded a bit. Lu Yong went out to entertain guests with several Taoist priests in charge. Qin Pingon bowed his head and said with a smile on his face, don't worry, I'm just passing by. I'm just asking for a drink. I'm not asking for elixirs, and I'm not asking for autumn wind. The old man laughed loudly and reached out to grab Qin Pingan's arm. A bad guest comes to the door. A bad guest comes to the door. As soon as they meet, they beat around the bush and scold the host for being stingy. Deng Jianping saw this scene in his eyes, and it can be seen that the relationship between Lolu Mountain and Qingjing Mountain is extraordinary. They had passed by the Qingjing Mountain boundary before, but they did not climb the mountain. The brother-in-law mentioned it casually, saying that this place is rich in Taoism and uniquely blessed by nature, and it is a rare place where dragons emerge. Qin Pingon introduced Deng Jianping's identity as his direct descendant. Lu Yong and the Taoist priests naturally congratulated him sincerely. It was a great blessing for the young man to be able to study swordsmanship and practice Taoism under Yinguan. Zhao Zhu, who is a down-and-out mountain guest, also told the story of his apprentice, Gongxing, who has no nickname yet. The little Taoist boy did not have stage fright, and explained to Qin Jianxian that it was the prosperity of the heart, not the heart of the mood. Xiego said abruptly, "Mountain Master, it's strange. The kid next to Zhao Keqing is still good at cultivating Taoism. Why is the death energy on his body so heavy and entangled? Seems to be quite heavy and has been entangled with numerology. After dealing with it, compare trouble. Of course I can kill this death energy with a sword, but it will hurt the child's Dao roots. It would be better if fellow Taoist Chunyang is here." Qin Pingon actually saw the strange aura in the little Taoist boy. The human body is like a temple. If the gods don't occupy it, wild ghosts will come and grab the territory. Over time, it will become like a temple of obscenity and go to the sidelines. It's okay if you don't go up the mountain to practice Taoism. As ordinary people may be a bit unlucky, but after entering the Qinghu Palace, they are in conflict with the invisible and thick local Taoism. Fortunately, Qingjing's mountains, clouds and water are light and clear, and the earth's atmosphere is mellow, so the two sides will not fight, but just it's like quarreling all the time. If it goes on for a long time, the child will be exhausted and become more and more weak and weak. It seems that the old man has tried to remedy the situation, but in the end he only treats the symptoms but not the root cause. I'm afraid if it continues he will have to be sent to hospital. The child has gone down the mountain. Xiego asked, "Isn't Qinghu Palace good at refining Yuhua pills? Isn't it right to give the right medicine?" Qin Pingon said, "I am afraid that I have already eaten so that the little Taoist boy can maintain his current situation." Xiego asked, "The mountain master wants to take action? Are you sure?" Qin Pingon said, "After all, it's a very important matter, so I have to make some temporary preparations." Xiego grinned. Since the mountain owner said so, it was very safe. Xiego turned to Deng Jianpain and said something serious. "Jianpain, we mountain masters know a lot, learn slowly. We, the Taoists, have worked hard to learn from Taoism. Don't enter Baoshan and return empty-handed." The suffix of is added to the name. I don't know who brought this trend to the mountain. Anyway, Xiego found it very palatable. Deng Jianpain nodded vigorously, and as he traveled far and wide with his sword, he became more and more respectful to this young girl. Highly talented, good-tempered and broad-minded. Qin Pingon first asked Zhao Zhu about the child's birth date, then bent down, smiled with the little Taoist boy named Gongxing and said, "Stretch out your hand." The ignorant little Taoist boy stretched out his hand. Qin Pingon first took the child's hand, weighed it gently and touched the bones. Then he put his fingers together and wrote a word on the child's palm, "Edict." The words on the palm of my hand shone with golden light and disappeared in a flash. The sound of gold and jade vibrates loudly at the same time. Qin Pingon said silently in his heart, "Retreat." Qin Pingon retracted his hand like a kind elder, rubbed the child's head and said with a smile, "I live in a quiet mountain, and I am a Taoist who is full of energy and practices hard." The little Taoist boy nodded blankly. The child was inevitably doubtful. He looked up at the man with a gentle smile. With such a good temper, was he really a swordsman who could kill everyone? I heard that there is a landscape minister who has made great contributions in the Qingjing mountain area in my family. He has been protecting the mountain tops diligently for hundreds of years. Must be informed in advance just to avoid this hidden official. My master tried to persuade me several times but to no avail. Qin Pingon spoke to Lao Zhenren and Zhao Zhu from the bottom of his heart. For the time being, I am just using talismans to stabilize Gongxing's mind. The words of the imperial edict are one talisman with 3 meanings, and the mountains and rivers are thunderous. I try to take a gentle path and don't dare to let the child live in a small world. The movement was too loud. So Zhao Zhu needs to take Gongxing to Aquarius continent later, and then go directly to Fuyao Foot to find me where my temporary dojo is now. The old man bowed his head and thanked me. "Thank you, Master Qin." Zhao Zhu asked his children to follow him and thank Shanju Qin. The child was very happy when he heard that he would soon be able to go down the mountain to play and take a long trip. In the Qinghu Palace, Qin Pingon didn't even drink. He chatted for a few words and then stood up to leave. The so-called small talk is not all trivial matters and polite greetings, but more a matter of mentality and position. For example, Qin Pingon asked Lao Zhenren what they thought of the old monks and old sects in the south of Aquarius continent. Lu Yong also wanted to let the disciples of Zhao Zhao's generation go out to experience and practice with the juniors, so along the central route a trip to do is a good choice. In addition, Qingping Jianzong, Tapingshan Daquan Dynasty, and Jade Guizhong are all places you must go to. The little Taoist boy's face was flushed and he looked like he wanted to speak but didn't dare. Qin Pingon smiled and asked, "Gongxing, what's the matter?" The little Taoist boy secretly glanced at his master and master. The old master stroked his beard and smiled encouragingly, saying, "That's it. Master Chen's visit to our Qinghu Palace is just a visit from his own relatives." Trail Tong said, "Qin Jianxian, let me tell you something. We have a mountain protector who is from a local demon tribe. He seems to be very afraid of you. As soon as he heard that you were mountain climbing, he went out to relax again." Qin Pingon didn't know whether to laugh or cry and asked curiously, "Lao Lu, fellow Taoist Xianxia, didn't you tell this worshipper about the situation in Luapa Mountain?" Zhao Zhu was helpless. "I told you it's useless. Our mountain protector has a simple mind and likes to accept death." Not only did he not listen to the advice, but he also said that we were only familiar with Qin Pingon and Master Chen. In fact, he was not familiar with the hidden people of the Sword Qi Great Wall. "I am not familiar with the official. When the time comes, the man surnamed Chen will attack him fiercely. He will not be able to run away. Not only will he lose his life, he will also cause the relationship between Qinghu Palace and Luo Luoshan to be in trouble. If he can't do it, he might as well hide every time. Then someone named Qin can't come to Qingjing Mountain as a guest every 2 days." Qin Pingon couldn't help but laugh and joked, "It sounds reasonable." The old man laughed loudly and said, "I don't blame those who don't know." Xiego was even more happy. Didn't he know that our mountain master has 2 flying swords called Chu Yi and 15? Qin Pingon glanced at Xiego, and the girl in the mink hat tilted her head habitually, and her eyes suddenly became clear. Qin Pingon had no choice but to ignore Xiego. Anyway, she had a big heart and she was face to face, so she said directly to the child, "Gongxing, you can tell the mountain guard that the second priest next to me is a wild sword cultivator. She, the Taoist companion, also has the same identity." Gongxing nodded. "Qin Jianxian, I understand." Xiego suddenly showed his teeth and claws and made faces to scare the child. Gongxing remained motionless, just curious what was she doing. Xiego was annoyed at first, but then he became happy. "Hey, it's not good to be too beautiful. You can't even scare the children." Before leaving, Qin Pingon gave the little Taoist boy a small pocket sword, which was temporarily forged. He smiled and said, "It's a custom in my hometown. The master who forged the sword will use his own experience and the child's personality and temperament to make the sword. The breath sends out different small swords which are either fairy magic weapons or good omens. Almost every household needs them. You can keep them in your study or carry them with you." Then when Deng Jianping sacrificed the 3 mountain talisman, they crossed the continent in 1 step and went straight to the top of Nanyue Mountain in Aquarius continent. At the Qinghu Palace, the old master smiled and asked for a small sword from the child. The sword was engraved with a line of text which had a very good meaning. It looked like the handwriting of the young Yingguan, which was correct. "I am good at cultivating the aura of awe-inspiring people." Seeing how much his master couldn't put it down, the little Taoist boy reminded him, "Master, remember to return it to me?" The old man handed the small sword back to the child and said with a smile, "Stingy little kid. How could the little Taoist boy be afraid of his master?" He carefully put away his sword and made a face. Among the 5 mountains of Aquarius continent, only Zitong Mountain, the southern mountain, has only one mountain named Saiji Mountain, which is the Crown Prince's mountain. Fan Junmao not only took the name Zuwei for himself, but was recognized and canonized by the Confucian Temple. He also had the unexpected joy of receiving a plaque titled, "Green Mountains in the World." And this plaque hangs high at the archway at the foot of the mountain. It is in line with Fan Junmao's acting style, which is high profile and public, without being subtle or pretentious. There is an endless stream of pilgrims coming here to pay their respects. Without exception, they will stop here and look up at the plaque. Many elders will also teach their children how to read. On the roadside there was a young man with a sword squatting and retching, holding a bamboo stick with one hand. Standing next to him was a man with arms and sleeves and a girl in a mink hat. Xiego said, "The foundation is indeed a bit weaker than expected. Qingjing Mountain is at the northern end of Tongye Continent, and Nanyue Mountain is at the southernmost edge of Aquarius Continent. In addition, Xiego was also responsible for helping Deng Jianping stabilize his Tao Qi during this process. So this cross-continental journey with the three mountain talisman was swim. The water is relatively large. Qin Pingon said, before Jianping was weak he was mostly wandering around. It is not easy to have the physical foundation he has now. They can stay here for as long as they have to burn incense. The last time there was a meeting in the imperial study room of the great Li capital, Fan Junmao served as a lobbyist for the southern countries. He was rather lame and not very competent. Let's not talk about cultivation but only about official skills. How can Fan Junmao defeat those old foxes like Xin Chen, the Minister of War, and Zhao Duanjin, the Minister of Rights? Once the letter of credence jointly signed by Dali Li and Bing ministries comes out, how can a certain country's court or a certain immortal mansion dare to go to Dali capital in the north and ask Honglu Temple to help arrange accommodation? Xiego asked, looking for Fan Junmao to catch up on old times? Qin Pingon heard a pun in it and asked, have you dealt with Fan Shanjin's Shinto predecessor? Xiego chuckled, she was more aggressive back then and I wasn't bad either. Isn't this just the bastard's love for Meng Bin? Qin Pingon asked in confusion, then why didn't Fan Shanjun recognize you last time in Lijing City? Xiego and Xiao Imo were in the corridor outside the house at that time. Xiego was arrogant, laughed and said, I almost don't recognize myself now. How could she recognize a passerby who just had a fight? Besides, most people who are not reincarnations of high-ranking gods will lose some memories. And these so-called memories is the key to the throne of the ancient gods. Didn't so-and-so say it? It was Xiaomo's friend, that Lu Laosan, who guessed that an illusory but ubiquitous long river of time is most likely the source of countless trillions of trivial memories. Summary and arrangement. Qin Pingon waved his hand gently, signaling Xiego to stop the topic. Our headmaster Lu is really willing to talk to his friends. Xiego asked, are we just stuck at the foot of the mountain? Qin Pingon said, the last meeting in the imperial study room made her a little embarrassed to come to the stage. It is estimated that even if we let someone inform us, she would still be rejected. Maybe it would be difficult for the female officer of the etiquette department to reply to us. Fan Shinjun just said that she is not here. Xiego smiled and said, this is her old temper, so I'm not surprised at all. Qin Pingon joked, there is a big difference in Xie Six's attitude towards Fan Shanjun and Qing Tong. Xiego curled his lips and said, whoever I approve or disapprove does not matter about their background. Unexpectedly, just when Qin Pingon was about to take Xiego and Deng Jianping to stroll in the market near the foot of the mountain, Fan Junmao used a trick and was actually willing to go out to entertain the guests in person. But instead of going up the mountain, Fan Junmao followed the previous direction of Qin Pingon and others, and went to the bustling streets of the market. Along the streets there are incense shops, bookstores, restaurants and inns. Nothing happens on the mountain and the world is at peace. Qin Pingon put his hands on his sleeves and said with a smile, it's rare. Fan Junmao's face was full of irritation, waiting for people, welcoming people and sending them off, official articles full of nonsense, no time to relax, the etiquette department is full of wine bags and rice bags. Anyone dares to take them to the mountain, what's the hindrance to human relations? It isn't the face of my majestic Zhou Xian not face? Every day I see this and that, and who I see tomorrow and the day after tomorrow has been arranged and I was asked to review it. Your uncle, they are all things that cannot be dealt with. See, a few are better than seeing them all. Fan Junmao is indeed depressed. Now the chief officials and managers of various departments in Nanyue are all fighting life and death with her back then. Their moral character is nothing to say, but their ability to handle common affairs is really worrying. Deng Jianping was stunned when he heard this. This famous Lord Zhuwei has such a distinctive personality. Qin Pingon smiled and said, let's negotiate with the Department of Etiquette first. After 7 or 8 years of being busy like this, it doesn't matter which country you are the emperor or prince of or whose clan leader or leader you are, you will all be gone. Good people may not be good officials. Of course, it does not mean that official seats must be occupied by bad people. Moreover, many corrupt officials who are good at power actually go there to be honest officials who benefit one party and leave a name in history. As long as they are a gangster, the officialdom, the public practice, the mountains and the mountains are the same, and Confucianism talks about 1,000 ways and 10,000, but still goes back and forth on the word name and reality. It is a different approach but the same result. It is nothing more than working on human nature and the human heart. As the lord of a mountain with jurisdiction over thousands of mountains and rivers, it is your duty to avoid such complicated etiquette in the early stage. It is too impersonal and it will definitely not work. The etiquette department will also be in trouble. Just wait until others adapt to you. If you are too talkative, it is easy for others to be hard to talk to. After all, the ceremony department is only one of the 20 or so government offices in Nanyue. You can remind them appropriately not to be confused about who is older and who is younger, who comes first and who comes last. Fan Junmao didn't know whether he heard it or not. Anyway, his expression was reluctant. You are now a high official, let me listen to you. Qin Pingon smiled and said, if you really want to save worry, effort, trouble and time, I also have a convenient method. Do you want to listen? Fan Junmao said, you should have said it earlier. Qin Pingon said, you are not worthy of being a divine king. Without an official position you will feel light. Fan Junmao glared. Qin Pingon, have you eaten too much bad food and come up with some bad ideas? Nanyue resigned after receiving the title of god. Fan Junmao would not dare to compete with the Chinese Confucian temple like this if he did not take the rules seriously. Qin Pingon smiled and said, then the next best thing is to find a place inside and outside. If you have a helper who can convince everyone, you can feel more at ease as a hands-off shopkeeper. Fan Junmao said helplessly, where can I find such a powerful person? I am a tiger. Who can I burn incense and make a wish for? Qin Pingon smiled and said, isn't this the answer? Fan Junmao said angrily, I came down the mountain just to relax, not to make any excuses with you. Qin Pingon was non-committal. Xiago suddenly started to get close to him. Junmao, you don't need to use any tricks. You can walk on the street so struttingly that no one will recognize you. At most, you think some girl is not beautiful if she is not beautiful, but you are really good-looking. Blessing seems to be somewhat similar to the Tiger Empress. I don't know whether he was fooled by the words Junmao, or because he was offended by the words that followed. In short, Fan Junmao didn't answer anything. Xiago didn't take it seriously. If a person you like has no temper, doesn't it prove that you have a problem with your vision? Fan Junmao asked in his heart. Leaving aside our identities, don't you think that the hand of the Dali court has been stretched too far? The old almanac of a country and a continent has been turned over after all. If I remember correctly, Confucianism, do you like to insist that one master should be famous? The Song family of Dali is no longer the orthodox place in the continent. This is also the fault of Xiuhu, leaving you with such a mess. He promised to allow the restoration of the country after the war. If this was not mentioned from the beginning, what would have happened back then? Who dares to object? In the entire Aquarius continent, only Song he was still qualified to wear dragon robes. Even if he took a step back and agreed to end the war, now the southern countries must always recognize the Great Li imperial court as the suzerain state. Is it better than the current people's hearts are agitated? Since they are domineering, Xiuhu and Dali should just stick to it and end up turning to the king's way halfway. What did Xiuhu think at the time? He is not the kind of scholar who seeks a posthumous reputation. There is no need at all. Isn't it unnecessary? Qin Pingon hummed in approval and then slowly replied, you were so angry at the time that you may have ignored something I said. Aquarius Island must be mentally prepared for a second war within 10 years. I guess many of you here think I am alarmist. But you are definitely an exception. Fan Junmao nodded. People who are accustomed to a peaceful world will feel that peace is a natural thing. Qin Pingon continued, Song he came to see me in private once on a country road. The two sides had a very open and honest conversation. I once directly asked him if he wanted to restore the territory of the Great Li dynasty at its peak. He probably knew that this issue must be solved. He answered very carefully, hesitated for a long time and finally answered that he really wanted to, but maybe he and the Great Li cavalry couldn't do it. When he said this truthfully, Song he actually used some words and looked at my eyes, want to find my truest inner thoughts. It is normal. After all, I am a person who is used to being an emperor. I asked him, what can Song he do with a country and a half continent, and what can Dali do with a country and a continent? What else could he do? He obviously had a rough idea and his answers were flawless, so I asked him again, what are the things about Aquarius Island that we all regard as habits but are actually wrong? Since he knew that it was hard to deal with them, he couldn't answer them. He said that he wanted to think about it again. I asked him again why the Great Wall of Sword Qi, which had been defended for 10,000 years, could not be defended, and why the Aquarius continent, the smallest territory in Hauran-Jiuzhou, could block the wild monsters. Did he have any unique ideas? Insights? He was obviously a little nervous, so I said it was just an additional question. You can think about it and you don't have to have an answer. Fan Junmao was silent. Xiego laughed in his heart and said, Jianping, did you hear that Fan Shanjun has been bypassed? She has forgotten the first question she asked. Our mountain master, your new master, is awesome, right? Deng Jianping finally came back to his senses and chewed carefully. Master has finally given the answer without using words. The streets were bustling with traffic. From time to time, Qin Pingon would turn sideways to give way to others, or others would give way to Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon put his hands in his sleeves and said calmly, but in this world, there are too many on the mountain who have become gods and are not human beings. There are especially many south of Chidu. Fan Junmao nodded. People who fear power but not virtue have been as common as the Crucian carp crossing the river since ancient times. Up and down the mountain, people should be respected by their power. Qin Pingon changed the topic and said with a smile, I was copying scriptures in an ancient Luzong temple. A group of big pilgrims asked the abbot how to maintain health. The old monk only said that children from rich families have no worries about food and clothing. If they want to keep fit, what do they need? The exquisite knowledge of self-cultivation is just to sit less in sedan chairs and walk more, drink less flour wine and eat more vegetarian food. There is an old tree next to the life-releasing pond in the temple. When the deadwood comes into spring, another layman asked the abbot if it was due to the monk's profound Daoist power. The old monk was indifferent at that time. The answer is watermore. Fan Junmao smiled knowingly and said, the real Buddha only speaks ordinary words. Qin Pingon said, we have to continue on our way, so we won't disturb Fan Shanjun from returning to the mountain to continue entertaining guests. Fan Junmao stopped and rolled his eyes and said, even if you are sarcastic, wait and see what my attitude will be when you become the Grand Master of Dali. A ship goes east and a ship goes west, and the feng shui is different whether it is good or bad. You have to ask the passengers on the downwind ship. Will the wind direction remain the same tomorrow? Xiego quickly held up the mink hat and was shocked. Jianping, what should I do? This woman started to pull one. I suffered the loss of being unprepared. One can't fight her. Deng Jianping said helplessly, Xietzi, she knows. I've never been good at words. Qin Pingon smiled and said, the water waves rise and fall, the wind comes and goes, the environment changes at will, and it remains motionless like a mountain. Fan Junmao laughed it off and went home. Deng Jianping's expression was sincere and his tone was extremely firm. Master, you don't have to ask us to do anything for our master's Taoism and Luopa Mountain, but as disciples we can't completely live without this reward. It's the master's thoughts. The disciple is dull and begs the master to make a request or two, but he is also kind-hearted and focused on working hard. Xiego looked at Deng Jianping with admiration. He usually looked at Deng Jianping and said nothing, but he never thought that he was brave. It's only been a few days since I learned skills from my master, and you're already teaching me how to do things? Qin Pingon thought for a while and said, from now on I just need to go down the mountain with my sword, travel around the world, make more friends and mind my own business. Mind your own business. Deng Jianping recited it silently in his heart several times. Afterwards, Qin Pingon and the others came to a mountain top near Xianyu County. Going to the county town and knocking on the door of a martial arts gym, Deng Jianping followed his master and found a group of young martial artists practicing boxing and walking, beating their muscles and bones and shouting and drinking. But there was an old man, probably the owner of this small martial arts studio, lying on a wicker chair holding a cattail fan and actually fell asleep snoring loudly and loudly. People who pay money to learn martial arts in a martial arts school seem to be accustomed to this. Anyway, there are senior brothers who give guidance, and they are as good as the old-fashioned sayings of the master of the gym. Many young and strong men in the martial arts hall recognize this green-shirt guest. They have been here before and have a good relationship with the master. The master occasionally drinks and brags, and will say that the three of them have traveled together in the world and passed countless mountains and rivers. They joined forces to slay demons on the road and saw many strange things. Back then he was the one who protected the two fledglings, but now it feels good to hear them call him Brother Su. Qin Pingon stretched out his hand to indicate that there was no need to wake up their master. He brought a bamboo chair to the familiar road and sat next to the rattan chair. He leaned back comfortably on the chair, crossed his legs and began to smoke a dry cigarette. The clouds were shrouded in mist and his face was blurred. Several times turning around he wanted to laugh out loud and put the old bearded knight out of bed. He quickly got up to drink and then told him that I had already contacted Su Zidao, asked for a preface, as well as poems by Bai Yi and Exen Jian. If I am not strong enough, you must not drink a few bowls of wine first. Putting away the dry tobacco stick, Qin Pingon held the back of his head with his hands, straightened his legs and leaned against the bamboo chair lazily, closing his eyes, wanting to squint for a while and take a break from the busy work. Deng Jianping glanced at Xie Zishi. What should he do? Xiego grinned. It's such a big deal, it's easy to handle. I'll send you to Luo Luo Mountain first. Just leave it to Gon. When Qin Pingon opened his eyes, he was surprised to find that it was dark night and he was covered with a piece of clothing. Deng Jianping must have been at Lolu Mountain, but Xiego was lying on a wicker chair nearby, pretending to be old-fashioned, swinging his cattail leaf fan and enjoying himself. Qin Pingon asked, "How long have you slept?" Xiego was in high spirits. "Just a little while, don't delay things." Qin Pingon let out a sigh. Xiego laughed loudly. "Xiaomo has gone home and is helping Master Su in the kitchen. The two men look very nice in their aprons." Qin Pingon squinted and smiled, leaning on the bamboo chair again. "Then let's wait for dinner." Xiego covered his mouth with a cattail leaf fan and lowered his voice and said, "Mountain Master, it's really not me who is causing trouble. When Master Su saw you sleeping soundly, he called you a brat and scolded you softly many times." Qin Pingon smiled softly and said, "You're afraid he'll scold you when I wake up?" Xiego nodded vigorously. "Who says it's not the case? The road in the world is rough and difficult, but we can be calm if we know each other. The middle-aged will be middle-aged and the old will be old. They all once traveled with sweet-scented osmanthus and wine as a young man. They were drunk, stroking their big beards, wetting their Taoist sleeves and raising their straw sandals.